Hello, Carl here. I generally have objectively correct opinions on everything, so I just wanted to let you guys know what the best arcs in One Piece are. So let's get started. I want to go over the criteria first. Uh, how are we judging this? How am I letting you know? So I'm going to look at the highlights and upsides, which means individual moments that stand out, but also just general positive things over the course of the arc. Then, of course, the downsides on the other hand. A bit on the pacing and efficiency, because arcs, could have a lot of good things, but if it's spread out over a lot of episodes, it kind of thinnens the niceness of it. Backstories. One Piece has many amazing backstories, and it tends to use them in a separated short story kind of manner. So they aren't as easily just included in the normal plot, even if, of course, they can work as highlights that work to amplify the investment we have in the characters and the plot that's currently going on. I want to add and clarify that an arc introducing an important character or concept is not a criteria for its quality. So even if something is mentioned that later becomes important, or a character is shown that later becomes important, especially if it's just kind of a side thing that's not really, you know, put focus on, that is not a justification for the arc and the plot itself to be bad. And it is not a counter argument to say that an arc is bad. So, for the easy example, some people say that Foxy, you should consider that in the Long Ring on Land, we're introduced to Davy Back fights, which potentially will be relevant in the future. That does not matter, even if they become crucial. Uh, doesn't change anything. Dog is still shit to watch. If you have a really, really horrible dinner that borderline poisons you, and then you find out that the plate you ate from was also used by the president, it doesn't change anything about how shit your dinner was. So, just wanted to clarify that. If it was more intentional and there are things put in that the author uh, intentionally wants to set up for future arcs, then that's a more valid point of basically something resembling world building, but especially if it's a gardening type of approach where, a lot of things are added and then later on the author decides to pick up on something they wrote before, which is a lovely thing to do. Especially if it's that, then you can't really defend that specific arc with it. The upsides of that, of that gardening and of the seeds you picked there are seen in the later arc. So in the arc that would have the debut back fight, right? But it doesn't in any way protect the original arc. For a quick list, in order, chronologically, not rating wise. Romance Dawn, Orangetown, Syrup Village, Baratia, Arlong Park, Loketown, Reverse Mountain, Whiskey Peak, Little Garden, Drum Island, Arabasta, Dry Escapia, Long Island Land, Water 7, Indy's Lobby, and Post Indy's Lobby. I've combined them into one. Thriller Bark, Saboti Archipelago, Amazon Lily, Impel Down, Marineford, Post War, Return to Saboti, Fisherman Island, Funk Hazardous Rosa Zoo, Whole Cake Island, Reverie, Wano Country, and Egghead. Elbaf is not done yet, so we are not including it in this list. So let's get started. Perhaps unsurprising after my earlier explanation, in last place is Long Ring Long Land. 13 episodes. Um, yeah. Uh, Highlight wise, Kuzan at the end shows up uh, and freezes some Straw Hats, which is very cool. It's also completely disconnected from the actual plot of the Long Ring Long Land arc. It's much more appropriate. It's part of the Water 7 arc, not of this arc, but officially it's categorized as part of Long Ring on Land. So technically it is an upside of this arc, but realistically it has nothing to do with Foxy or the fight or anything there. It's just separate. Uh, yeah. Downsides. It's the ultimate canon filler arc. You watch this and you think it's filler, it's silly, it's stupid, and it seems somewhat disconnected. But no, it's actually canon. Now, the main downside out of this, I would say, is the concept of gambling or losing crewmates in a enforced magical system. Uh, it's incredibly frustrating. Losing crewmates, of course, is horrible, and in the following arcs, for example, we fight very hard to not lose crewmates. But that's different. This here is in an artificial, forced way, and because of that, we know it's not actually going to happen. We know Chopper isn't leaving the crew, but that makes it all the more frustrating to have to go through this. and just suffer through it. And what amplifies that is that the fights and the challenges are incredibly unfair. Uh, they're Foxy, etc., are constantly cheating, and that's annoying normally, but usually those type of things happen at smaller stakes. But here, technically, the stakes are about as big as it can get, and then the unfair fights just end up being all the more frustrating. And that's just the general feeling you have while watching this arc: frustrated and annoyed. At Foxy, at the setup, at how we even got into this mess. And so it's just not a good viewing experience. Um, this is the only arc in One Piece I actively dislike watching, that I have a bad time with, you know. Some of the other arcs that we'll see are maybe boring or have downsides, but nothing matches Long Ring Long Land. Some people think it's funny, and I guess good for them that they get to watch this with less pain in their heart, and maybe they just have an extra touch more joy in their soul. But just from an objective level, this is the worst arc in One Piece. As I mentioned before, the fact that potentially some lore is left behind does not in any way justify this entire shitty arc. We get to number 30. Who is it? It's Syrup Village. Um, Syrup Village doesn't have any highlights. There's nothing positive that stands out about it. That nothing happens. There's no nothing positive happens. There's no cool fights or anything. There's no huge moments. But it does have downsides. Usopp is whiny. I mean, he always is, but you know, this is his island, so we get to experience that a good amount. Um, Kuro's plan is kind of dumb. Like, wanting to, you know, fake your death is kind of reasonable in a way. It somewhat makes sense, but the execution of like then getting rich by becoming a butler for a couple of years and then it's a mess. And the fight takes way too long. It's like half the arc. They just like wait at the entrance to the island and have a weird fight that isn't really satisfying in any way. The backstory of Usopp is all right. It does it's like a the boy who cried wolf type thing, and so uh, that isn't actually innately bad. Um, but the actual plot, the actual content of the arc is just not good. At spot number 29, we have Whiskey Peak. So Whiskey Peak has the positive aspect of Zoro, basically. Zoro fighting 100 guys and coming out on top. But even that is mostly just nice in the way of like people speaking back of, I hear Zoro, killed 100 bounty hunters in Whiskey Peak. The fight itself is kind of, meh, fun, but like nothing, you know, amazing. And the reason why it's so low, since the rest of it is just kind of fine, is the Zoro versus Luffy. It's like one of the biggest mistakes, one of the most out of character moments for Luffy. He wakes up and he just runs and fights Zoro because Zoro fought, killed or beat these people that originally treated them nicely. But he doesn't trust his crewmate here, and he knows what type of a guy Zoro is, so it's artificial and forced conflict in the most frustrating way possible. It's just bad. I was so happy when they cut it out of the live action. It's yeah. Uh, the whole thing itself begins the saga. Everything aside from Luffy and Zoro is fine, so it's not that bad. So we can continue. Next up, we have 28 Reverse Mountain. Reverse Mountain is just 2 episodes. Like, there's not much to say. It's short. It does what it needs to. The Luffy painting the Jolly Roger badly on Laboon is really cute and fun. Prevents the smashing in a you know kind of cute way, and is just a nice little highlight. It's fine. Like, this arc doesn't stand out in any way, and it doesn't need to, right? It's just in between. But it would be unreasonable to give it a higher spot, even if it doesn't do anything innately wrong. Then for 27, we have Orangetown. Orangetown is 5 episodes. It's the second arc, and Oda's kind of still finding his footing, even though like In hindsight, now we have Buggy, and Impel Down, he stands out. It's just amazing. It's easy to forget that the actual introduction and the arc is just kind of bad. Uh, Luffy impressing Nami is nice when we're just starting out. Seeing her, notice that Luffy's different. Um, and the actual fight between Luffy and Buggy is actually also kind of fun because it's very devil fruit wacky in a way we haven't seen before and don't see again for a while. Um, but the arc itself, Luffy captured, the town itself is boring. Uh, Buggy mentioning Shanks is cool, but it's just not a great arc to watch through. It has a little choo choo dog thingy, which takes a whole bunch of time. Zoro's fight against the circus act is not, you know, fun, just kind of annoying sometimes. We in total get Nami and Buggy later, of course, but mostly we get Nami. So that's the positive aspect of it. And next up, we have a 26 Little Garden. 8 episodes, a lot of episodes per chapter, a lot of chapters per episodes. It has instinct. One of my favorite, funniest moments, especially early on, is after Mr. 3 escapes after getting beaten by Luffy. He has a bunch of wax figurines set up, painted, and is like, "Oh, which one am I? Can you tell?" And Luffy just kicks him in the face, the right one. And he's like, "How did you know?" And Luffy just shrugs and like, instinct." And it's just so simple and funny to me. Um, the island and the giants are nice, just world building wise. The concept is fun. The fact that Zoro and Sanji imitated like who can kill the biggest dinosaur, a little nod to it. And Sanji as Mr. Prince is nice to have. Calling Crocodile lying and setting that up is just fun to watch. However, the fight against Mr. 3 is kind of extended. Uh, he becomes a big candleman and it loses kind of character and yeah, generally it just doesn't stand out. It has little nice things, but nothing that would be that enjoyable. For 25, we have Return to Sabaody. Relatively short, but it has a little bit of advantages. Luffy flexing is fun, seeing him one-shot the Pacifista, right? Who doesn't like a bit of the protagonist showing off? When they return and go, to head to Fishman Island, the people that they've trained with or that they were with in the last 2 years come to assist them, and that is fun to watch. Rayleigh drawing the line and be like, "Hey, who wants to try me?" Perona sending his negative hollows through the Navy soldiers and watching them wish to be a flea or something is hilarious, and generally just watching them, be protected in that manner is nice. And of course, just on a simple level, the crew's back. We're united. Having the time skip is nice, and now we get to be together again, see those interactions. Downsides, it's Chopper mistaking the Straw Hats, the fake Straw Hats, for the real Straw Hats is really annoying. By themselves, it would be kind of annoying to have the fake Straw Hats, and the fact that the fake Straw Hats like advertising themselves as Straw Hats so loudly gets the Marines there, which is a minor inconvenience, is also annoying. But it would be fine. But the fact that Chopper, who has been traveling, he's a crewmate, he's part of the crew, these are his closest friends, and yes, of course, he's naive. But the fact that he would repeatedly and for an extended amount of time see these obviously fake people and sincerely mistake them for his crew is annoying. And Sanji bleeds around because he sees actual women and like creeps up on Perona. He's having his relapse after all the cross-dressers he was with, but that gets even worse in the following arc, so it's only minor here. But we have the introduction, we had our time skip, we have okay, we're back, and now we continue our journey. Still not the best, but actually still nice to watch. Number 24, we have Zoe. A lot later of an arc compared to some of these. Um, it has some highlights. Seeing the first road poneglyph is really cool as we kind of escalate and get closer to finding out what the One Piece is, or no, to be more accurate, where it might be, starting the actual path towards it. The general, Zunisha smacking Jack is one of my favorite moments. It's hilarious seeing the, high level commander of one of the emperors just get completely whacked by a giant elephant. Uh, I very much enjoyed it. Beppo is just fun to have. I like Beppo overall, but seeing him, with his like at home, so to speak, right? But then also reunited with Law is just cute. Chopper with the girls is also nice. I feel happy for him. He gets the cute, pretty furry girls that he's always dreamed of, all the pretty reindeers that he wants, the combination that he was always missing. But in general, the aspect of like stepping stone, the diving point of, we have grander plans from here. We had, Dressrosa, and now we have a road poneglyph, and we're looking at the bigger picture. Now, it's not flawless. The one thing that annoys me about it is Momonosuke. I mean, he generally annoys me, but he's whiny. He cries all the time, and next sure he's a kid, but at the same time he's also lecherous and like goes after Nami's boobs all the time, uh, which just takes away the kid justification of being a whiny crying bitch, which is why Zoe is relatively low, even though it does have its highlights. Here now at 23 is Water 7. Okay, hear me out, okay? Before you attempt to uh, execute me for putting Water 7 in the last third of the ranking. Water 7 is not that good, alright? I'm sorry, but people rate it so highly and associate it so highly because it's connected to Enies Lobby. It's basically a prelude for Enies Lobby and sets up the things necessary for it. And if you counted it as one arc, as one story, which it arguably is, then I would see the early part of it as perfectly fine. But as it is, it just has that build up, right? So the island itself is cool as a design. It looks nice. We get to see some of it. It's a cool concept, executed well. The CP9 twist on who they were was cool. Um, Iceberg himself is just pleasant. I love that his little mouse is called Tyrannosaurus. He's adorable, and Iceberg is just a pleasant character overall. Just having somebody that, to some degree trusts the Straw Hats, even though there's some suspicion thrown on them. So I appreciate that. But then we get to Usopp. Uh, yeah, so if you like Usopp and if you like this, part of the story or this subplot, then I'm sure that reasonably puts Water 7 a lot higher for you on the list. I get it. The, Usopp's arc in Water 7, I understand, he's a human among monsters and he has his insecurities. Um, and he sees the Mary becoming, slowly less and less relevant and just, being left behind as a metaphor for himself, or it is a metaphor for him, and it is how it worries he will go, right? And since he also cares about it more, a bit more than the others do, because he always cares for it, and he's had the spirit appear to him, and it's from Kaya, he considers it more of a crewmate than the others do, or we do. So for him, it really does come across as a crewmate being left behind. But even though that is all understandable, it is still obnoxious. Uh, Watching him cry around, yell at Luffy, accuse Luffy of, abandoning people, yada yada, saying he'll leave the crew and leaving the crew, trying to fight Luffy for it. Um, it's just annoying. I, yeah, basically. I can see how somebody might enjoy it, but it's just most of the time not pleasant to watch. And that means that the actual things that happen in the Water 7 storyline is usually just set up. if you're counting Usopp as a downside, and then all that kind of happens is that we see, that Robin's being taken and who CP9 is, and it tells us what we're gonna do next. If you combine them, Water 7 is good, but just as a standalone, it doesn't work, and I don't think it's that good. Now, after that spicy hot take that some of you may not like, let's continue to more normal things. Number 22, I have the post-war. It is quite long, and a lot of that is Luffy's backstory with Sabo and Ace. And Luffy's backstory is fun, but not that, amazing or entrancing. It's nice to finally know, our main character's backstory, and it is nice. And we have Ace and we have Sabo. Uh, Sabo slightly feels like, was written in because Oda was then planning to use him in Dressrosa and wasn't, pre-planned when he originally made it with Ace. But the whole thing was still fun to watch, just not exceedingly so. The dedication to train after the Straw Hats get the message, it was cool to make the headlines again, going back to Marineford, and it's nice that everybody got the message and, made the dedication that they were going to train and be stronger, right? Which what we found out in Sabaody when we got completely wiped and knew that something needed to change, right? Um, Choppers was especially cute, I think, when he said that, he wanted to become human, but for Luffy, like if it's needed, I'll become a real monster, right? And I enjoyed that. And then of course them actually be getting stronger is also nice. For fun, I loved Beppo's moment where they're on the island of women and all the other Law's crewmates are wondering about the hot women on the island, and Beppo just wonders, I wonder if there are any female bears. Uh, and the rest of them scoff him that it's Island of Women, but little minor detail I enjoy. Luffy learning Haki is of course cool. We see some of it with Rayleigh, but it's just nice to have, especially we know he has the Latent Conqueror's Haki, so knowing it's being trained and activated, we knew we were gonna get some badass shit. Uh, Downsides, I just think Luffy's backstory is a bit slow. It takes a lot of time. Most of the time of post-war is Luffy's backstory, and it helps us understand him a bit more, especially after the forced character development that was Marineford. But it is something worth noting. Mostly, it is just all the setup that is needed before you can say we are now 2 years later, right? You need to say, okay, these people are here, 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 and they will do this, 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 this for the next 2 years. Got it? Okay, 2 years. And it does that pretty well. Then, next up, 21, we have Jaya. So, Jaya suffers from just having a lot of like nothing happening at times, but Jaya's I rate it pretty high because it has quite a few actual highlights, even if they are amid some not as nice things. So, of course, the first thing that comes to mind, do I know how to throw a punch? Luffy whamming and one-shotting Bellamy into the ground, like no devil fruit, like just raw force, incredibly satisfying since he's such a piece of shit. Just really badass. With the being down talked because he only had a 30 million bounty. Uh, really dope. One of the most memorable scenes. I think everybody thinks of it when they think of Mocktown. Mm. And then there's fucking Blackbeard. I mean, Blackbeard is great. He is an amazing villain introduction, and he has multiple aspects of that. Right away we see him beefing with Luffy. When it comes to the food, he's eating cherry pies. Um, Luffy, for some reason, doesn't like them, but right away we have them kind of, we have parallels between them, and yet we immediately see the stark contrast, or at least, on a metaphorical level. Of course, it's not a deep personality difference to dislike or like cherry pies, but they also have their little ramp up of who can order more things. Um, and so I appreciate that in such a, almost subtle manner, we get this instant comparison, and we see that this is a relevant character, and that he shares some things with Luffy, and he doesn't share some things with Luffy. We of course also get the people's dreams don't ever end, that like just the full expression of belief in freedom and dreams, just as Luffy does. But we can see that there's stark differences between Teach and Luffy. For comedic aspects, I love the horse too. Doc Hugh is weak and he needs help, and he half tries to kill Luffy, and he gets lucky, but he needs help getting onto the horse, and then the horse also needs help, and was just funny. They're also easy to forget, but right at the end of Jaya is when they actually get their updated bounties of 100 million and 60 million for Luffy and Zoro respectively, and that is always a nice moment to have. But the arc does have its downsides. Just the mockery just gets annoying. It takes a while till we actually get to punch Bellamy back. Of course, we actively see, the parallel to Shanks in Luffy's backstory, where now he is getting mocked and made fun of and has like food thrown onto him and drink, and instead of smacking back, he just, adds just a drink, right? And while, we as the viewer understand that that's what's happening and that there is reason to that, at the same time we know that Luffy could absolutely fold him right here without a problem, and it wouldn't be unreasonable to do so. So at some points we wish just do it already, and we do get that beautiful satisfaction from that eventually happening. Next up, we are in the top 20. Romance Dawn. The beginning. It's short, but it has a couple of things that make me put it quite high here. Uh, we kind of get the introduction to the story, Luffy's, silliness and the kind of comedy that's built into the way he fights at the start. Is just done well, and it's fun to watch even when there's no grand stakes happening just yet or no jokes being actively told. And then Luffy freeing Zoro just stands out, even after you get, tens of episodes into the story. It definitely remains as one of the coolest moments in the series by that point. Um, you know, Threatening him with not letting him go and just die or join his crew, and Zoro declaring that if he might as well be infamous. If he's gonna be famous, doesn't matter. And then him, cutting Captain Morgan and being like, no problem, Captain, is just badass and a great way to start things. Since it's also short and poignant, it doesn't lose anything for that. It doesn't really have any downsides, besides maybe that Koby is a whiny bitch, but because we're just starting, it's fine and it's not that long. We get Zoro's backstory, which is alright. It's okay, you know. By One Piece standards, it's not the highest, but there's nothing innately bad about it, and it sets up, enough about Zoro. Sets the tone for the show, for the manga, for the anime, and Zoro joins. So definitely a really nice thing, and it includes especially those Zoro moments at the execution yard. Now we continue. Number 19 is Skypiea. So somewhat of a disputed arc. Um, 43 episodes. I am also on a little bit on the Skypiea hater side, I suppose. I'm not one of the people who thinks it's really good, but Enel is just a very memorable villain. He's fun. He's incredibly overpowered, of course. He has a lightning Logia fruit is insane just by itself, and since he hasn't, met Haki in the ornament version, it's reasonable almost that he would see himself with such a godly status. We also get a good amount of lore, which is nice at times. So it can be fun in that sense. And as an individual moment, I personally very much enjoyed the bell and Luffy's shadow across the sky, in its massive form, signaling to everybody in Jaya as well that he is there. And so I just thought that was a great moment. It has its downsides though. It takes too long. 43 episodes here, and the highlights are far and few between. There are those nice things about it, the bit of world building, seeing Enel, but it's sometimes, and there's a long time taken trying to like get through his priests that nobody really cares about. We get some nice interactions with the Straw Hats, but It's generally just kind of drags. Uh, yeah, most of the things that happen feel irrelevant just because, well, because they're not even relevant for the Sky Island plot, but just because it's so disconnected from, the normal world. None of these people know anybody below, none of the people below know anybody there, that the smaller things don't really feel um, like they matter. The backstory is quite interesting. It's not as much the backstory of one person as that of an entire, country almost, right? And it's interesting in that sense, and unique in the way it's set up with Calgara and Norland. But yeah, since we do get a backstory of a almost society completely disconnected in the past, it does give an additional feeling of a bigger world where things have happened and do happen even while we're not there, and we're running into the remnants almost of this, right? Still, the arc takes a bit too long and has a lot of irrelevant stuff, which is why it is 19 and not higher up. Another debated one is Fishman Island. 58 episodes, also quite long, and you can also see here that it is at 0.88 chapters per episode, so it is slow in that regard as well. But it has a lot of highlights, I believe. So first of all, uh, Luffy knocking out 50,000 fishermen within an instant was badass as fuck, even if, they weren't any truly threatening things. It's just flexing with numbers, but that doesn't change the fact that it's badass as fuck. Not My Type is one of the funniest moments in the show. Um, this stalker that has been trying to marry her since she was a literal child. Um, has been throwing axes at her entire life. She hasn't been able to live freely because this maniac is trying to kill her because he won't marry her. And then, you know, at a climax, they finally run into each other, and instead of killing her, he gives her one last chance. Please marry me. And she hits him with the "You're not my type," as if that was like the deciding factor from this person who's been trying to kill you for decades and ruined your life. And it just hits him so brutally, he's just destroyed by this. And she does it again. So just really funny. I love that part. Another funny part was when Usopp and some others were caught in a cage, and Robin and Usopp imitates Robin and her like morbid humor. And as you can see at the top left, like his eyes kind of turn to how her eyes normally look. And he says like, "I hope Nami hasn't been eaten by a deep sea fish." But also in her like the way she talks, also incredibly funny. There's the beef with Big Mom at the end of the arc, and that's just nice seeing Luffy kind of pick a fight with an emperor like that. Really cool. The backstory of kind of not the country itself, but Fisher Tiger and the story in the country with the votes and stuff. It's almost more of a story than the actual thing itself, and it's fun to watch. It's important for the things that come, but it's also just entertaining and interesting to watch in itself, right? Which is why it doesn't fall under the clause of like having something that's later relevant isn't a good defense. In this case, it's a good example where you can have something be relevant for plot later, but still be interesting in the moment. We just get a lot of the world building. We get a bit more of an idea of the oppression of the celestial dragons, and specifically that the fishermen have experienced. And we also find out more about the ancient weapon Poseidon, and it becomes pretty clear that Shirahoshi is that ancient weapon, which is fun and interesting. However, there are downsides to it. It has all these highlights and is still, somewhere in the middle of the pack, and that's because it has some serious weaknesses. Sanji's bleeding is just horrible. Uh, Sanji's general joke of, getting a nosebleed when he sees hot women is, mildly entertaining at best, depending on how often you see it and how much of a problem it is. But this is just, you know, the bleeding is like a way to represent, yeah, it's just his horniness and the fact that he would be so horny that he actually needs blood transfusions, and that's a problem because the blood transfusions are an entire plot point in the Fishman Island due to the law banning them between the species. Uh, is ridiculous. It hurts again, and it's just painful. It actually just fucks up the story whenever it comes up. I'm glad he's calmed down, you know. He was exposed to cross dressers for 2 years, and now seeing women makes him faint. It's just kind of sad. Hody is also just a shitty villain. He doesn't, you know, he's not made to be amazing, right? They had their time skip, so Luffy needs to show that he's a lot stronger. But for the sake of a story, you don't want to just like, you know, one tap somebody. So having a moderately strong person beefed up in some unfair way that Luffy still beats is a good way to get around that, where you don't increase, you know, the strength of enemies too quickly, but still have a moderately uh, interesting fight. But Howdy, just with his character and motivation, is boring. Arlong is so much better. And of course, he intentionally stands as a contrast because there is no substance to his hatred. He hasn't been hurt or anything. But it doesn't play out in an interesting way and just makes him into a very, very boring villain. Shirahoshi also has this, you know, moment where she reveals that she actually saw Hody, you know, shoot and kill her mother. Um, but out of some pacifist reasoning, she didn't actually reveal that, and the entire problems of the arc could have been prevented easily, as Hody himself points out. Um, and it's not the type of heroic where it's justified. It's just kind of stupid. Uh, you know, needs to happen for the arc to happen, but that felt stupid. So yeah. And then lastly, the Noah taking a lot of damage is just kind of sad, you know. I hope it'll get fixed, and I'm guessing it will, but it hurt to see it happen nonetheless. And then Caribou kidnapping mermaids is gross and creepy, and the Straw Hats getting blamed for it is also just, you know, annoying slander. And I was very happy when it finally got resolved, even though Caribou made it out. They should have just, I don't know, shot him somewhere. Now then, let's continue on to number 17, Drum Island. Back a good step to earlier, we get to one of the classic arcs, one of the classic crewmates joining. It's 14 episodes, which is not that long, but we do get things done. We get Chopper. Of course, amazing. We needed a doctor. We need a doctor, and Chopper is great at exactly that. He's cute. Uh, just, you know, his transformations are cool. He's a nice design. Luffy saving the flag and protecting it is just a dope moment. Sometimes, you know, One Piece manages to make such epic and awesome moments out of things that would otherwise seem so arbitrary, like a flag getting shot down, right? And this is one of those things. The tree at the end also looks incredibly beautiful and works so nicely to kind of show and cement what Hero Look was achieving to do to cure the heart of the people. And it's just a beautiful way to resolve that. And when Chopper cries there, how can we not, right? Mm, the Wapol fight is just annoying. Like Wapol is hateable as a villain, which can be fun, but it takes too long. And yeah, combinations. The afro fighting of the dude with static hair is weird and annoying. And yeah, overall, it's really nice though. Backstory of Chopper is absolutely S tier. It is a unique backstory. It's just repeatedly devastating, right? Because we have like multiple stages of his, you know, backstory. You know, first he's abandoned by his, you know, deers, and then he's transformed, but he's also rejected as a human, and then he has Hirlook, who also dies, and it's just a backstory that's only possible in this unique combination of a reindeer becoming a human and using the power system in that way to write unique and sad backstories is just amazing when Oda does it. And Chopper's backstory is arguably half of what makes the arc so good, at least. But it is absolutely amazing. And yeah. And we got a doctor, so, you know, that's an important addition. We are almost in the top half. 16 is Thriller Bark. So, Thriller Bark is a relatively long arc, 45 episodes, and it's one that people are somewhat torn about because I don't think there's a lot of people who think that it's actively bad, but there's some that very highly enjoy it, and a lot of others that are just like eh. And so Thriller Bark has a lot of highlights. So I think everybody remembers Nothing Happened. It's just one of the most badass moments in the series, especially for Zoro. Perona is just fun to watch. She's of course has a nice design. Usopp knocking her out is funny. The bear Kumasi trying to tell her that they're hiding inside him, and her just shutting him up continuously. Uh, the negative hollow is one of the funniest abilities in the story. Just seeing Zoro and others just turn into like, I wish I was never born is just hilarious. Brook is fun. His backstory especially, and just his mission here, and it's just funny. A zombie pushing a Luffy pushing a zombie back into the ground with his expression and delivery is just hilarious. Robin being offered to join the docking and just saying that it would hurt her pride as a human being, also great. Frankie building stairs like midway on nothing as they close fall behind him. Just it's just a really funny arc, and I think that makes it enjoyable in a very casual way. The song, adding Drink Sake finally, is nice. It's just a good song, and with all the memories that connected to it, it becomes an emotional song as well. And Zoro getting Shusui is also really cool. Of course, it becomes later relevant, but him just getting a new badass sword is always going to be nice, right? But it does have its downsides. So one of the main ones is just that the fight versus Moria is mediocre, and Moria himself is just kind of a mid villain. While the original concept is cool and the Shadow Fruit is cool, he himself doesn't really do anything, and we're not that interested in him. We know that, you know, he got his ass kicked by Kaido at some point, and now he's all, has given up and is all cynical. But it's not that interesting, and character-wise, like Perona alone is more interesting than him, and kind of the rest. Um, so yeah, that part, the main villain is kind of mediocre, and the arc is just relatively slow. So we get these funny highlights, but it's between a lot of nothing happening, as Zoro would describe. The other thing is Absalom. Um, Absalom has this incredibly rapey plot where he tries to force Nami to marry him, and he has an invisible fruit, so he spies on her when she's naked, and it's it's really creepy, it's really rapey, and like it's just not pleasant to watch. Uh, yeah. Backstory, we'll go back to Brook here. Absolutely amazing. Again, similar to Chopper, it's a backstory where the devil fruit allows for an incredibly, unique backstory that wouldn't be possible in normal circumstances. Brook's, survival and the times and years that he spends just in nothingness waiting, and the delivery of it, the music, and then here in the frame there, the text isn't there, but he just still, after all that, he expresses the sentiment, I'm so glad I'm alive, right? And just after all those decades of being stuck and maybe wanting to die, maybe not, that sentiment and that relief for him is just so emotional. How could you not feel it? So overall, Turtle Bark has a lot of highlights, but people tend to forget that it goes through a lot of just nothing happening. But it's a good arc. It's a funny arc, and an arc one can generally stand behind. This is another one I'm gonna piss some people off with. Number 15, a bit more than halfway through, we have Wano. Um, Again, hear me out. I will defend this relatively strongly. You could see here already 200 episodes, right? Wano is long as fuck. And so it is bound to have some highlights, and it does. So obviously, Gear 5 is amazing. Gear 5 in itself is amazing. The way it appears in Wano is amazing. It's incredibly fun to watch. Super cool. It's impossible to not mention Gear 5 here. I actually quite enjoyed Luffy in prison, seeing him stand out in his most, like, even when reduced to such a level and competing as with Kid for extra rations was just nice. The immigrated Straw Hats are just kind of funny, seeing what professions they ended up with. Robin's a geisha, Usopp as a salesman, just it just fits, it's perfect. Um, and seeing those little, like, what would they, kind of like an alternate universe, like what would the Straw Hats be if X, right? So I think that's just funny to watch. Soba Chef Shanji, fantastic. Seeing the past with Odin, just mostly just because we get to see stuff like Roger and Whitebeard fight. Technically, it's disconnected from even Odin, but it's super badass, and we can't fully ignore it. I think Queen stands out. King is, technically has a cool backstory with the race and all, but the actual fight and just him as a character is not as interesting and fun as Queen. Queen has his own theme song singing about how if he was any thinner, he'd be too popular. There's women fainting. He's just really cool, and then, well, cool, but he's interesting. And then he actually has like all those different combinations of technology, devil fruit, etc. We also get Robin saving Sanji. I thought this was a really awesome moment. We have Sanji's, like, dedication to women and of course to his crew. And so he's being held, and they're trying to get him to call for the help of Robin, um, to ambush her, right? So the kind of classic expectation would be that no matter how much you torture Sanji or threaten him, he will never kind of, you know, bait his crewmates into this situation because he protects women or something. But he goes in the opposite direction, and he trusts Robin, um, and trusts in her strength, and doesn't have that kind of macho approach of protecting, but instead trusts in his crewmate and trusts in Robin as a friend and calls for her help. And then we see Robin get to beat the ever living shit out of Black Maria, and I just appreciated it because I wasn't expecting the direction of for that to go, and so it was really nice to see. Having the setup of four supernovas and two emperors was just cool. I mean, if you combine that many statuses together, you're bound to get some awesome things, and we got some absolutely awesome fights, back and forth, different scenario. Law with his silent technique was a little nice nod to Corazon. Really nice animation and well fought. And we just also get a lot of Luffy just aura farming, like holy. Walking by the Emperor's Gear 5, so insane, so cool. Um, yeah, that for the highlights. However, we had downsides. Wano takes forever. So 200 episodes is a lot. Something like Dressrosa is considered really slow, but it's like half the size of this. Uh, Dressrosa is really long, and not a lot happens for a lot of it. Like it has 3 acts, and some of them just nothing happens. Half of the time we spend in this nothing happening is Momonosuke whining and crying forever. Even at the end, when he's finally a dragon and needs to like hold up Onigashima because it's falling, he spends time like again and again crying about how he can't do this, and he needs like 3 encouragements from Luffy and other people till he finally gets off his ass, stops crying, and does this very minor job that he can be expected to do. Zoro being accused of like stealing and grave robbing Shusui is annoying, and finally gets resolved, and he gets an even cooler sword, arguably. But it's still a pain. Um, People say, oh, like the story of Wano, like of the country is so interesting, but it's really not. Especially by One Piece standards, we have countries that are completely, different from how they seem. Dressrosa and its toys. We have, truly sad stories. The Wano one can be simplified to basically just, you know, like you have an oppressive ruler, uh, and he doesn't give people enough food. And one time he killed like one of their heroes. That's it. It doesn't stand out. It's not that sad. The smiles are sad, but that aside, it's pretty normal of a status, and basically all of the relevant and cool, fun things are on the radar on Onigashima. So you could cut out so much of this arc and keep almost everything good about it. So you could cut, you know, 80% of it and you'd lose 5% of the good stuff. So while of course time gives us investment into the situation, it could be a lot faster. And if this was a lot faster, and if it was just the raid or the other stuff was set up much, more efficiently, this could be rated a lot higher. But some people rank this in like top three or something, and I just don't think that's reasonable. It's way too long for the highlights that it brings and for the positive aspects. So this arc is one of kind of potential of amazingness that was wasted a bit by way too long of a setup, but it still remains a relatively enjoyable experience, especially if you focus on the later part of it. We get to Alabasta. So Alabasta is a relatively long arc, especially uh, you know at the point in time when we get to it. Um, and it has some nice highlights. So we just started off right off with Zoro just cutting steel. It's been something he had been struggling with, as we saw in Mr. 3's fight, because he wasn't able to cut the wax that was as hard as steel. And now he was getting his ass beat unless he could cut steel. And then he finally kind of learns to hear the, you know, hear the sound of things, and is able to cut a stone but not a leaf, and then he's able to one shot Daz's bones. Really cool moment. Music cuts out, everything's silent. He's at the edge of death, and he succeeds. Crocodile is just really fun. He's a really evil villain, but in a fun way, not in like a boring way like Hody is. He's got that laugh. He's got the James Bond villain vibe. He's got insane powers, and he shows us repeatedly that he can absolutely destroy even Luffy. And he's just fun to watch. Little crocodile vibe to it. Yep, I like literally. The final fight is absolutely amazing. The first one kind of sets the tone. The second one shows that there's hope and uses water, and the third one is just a bloody beatdown, just amazing. And the last moments of the fight with Luffy's attack, I think it's Gum Gum Storm. Um, the music that plays is classical music, absolutely hype. Instead of using a previous OP or writing a new one, they decided to use classical music, and it works out perfectly. I highly recommend just watching that last bit in case you don't remember. Really good time. Mr. 2 is of course not as amazing as he is in Impel Down. He's being introduced here, but he's already great. Um, the fight with Sanji is funny, as Sanji kind of gets him to stop being Nami, and as he realizes that Sanji can't hit him while being Nami, and we see there's a already some sort of camaraderie, and there's definitely honor on his side, right? And of course he also protects Luffy and stuff afterwards. But the arc does have its downsides. Uh, it can be slow. It drags on a bit, and the way that it mostly plays out, being slow, in this arc is that it takes really long to get going. Like there's a point where basically we are just like, okay, we know where this is going, right? Everybody's gonna get matched up against one of the top agents. Zoro's gonna get number one, Sanji's gonna get number two, yada yada yada. Luffy's gonna fight Crocodile, and but we just wait 10 episodes, it keeps building up the rebellion. But it's not like it's interesting political intrigue. It's pretty straightforward. So we're just waiting, and that can be slow, especially by that point in time. Pell should have died. This is a somewhat of a nitpick, but I think most people would agree with this. Oda is very hesitant to kill off characters, and in Shonen, it's almost normal that you can get hit by an explosion, you can fall from any height, you can get stabbed or shot in the body, um, you can bleed out, unless you get executed on screen. Uh, you're gonna make it. Pell in this case was carrying a borderline nuclear bomb into the sky with a radius of multiple kilometers. Um, and he was like, adjacent to the explosion. So he should have died 100%. But Oda didn't want to, so he had him come back perfectly fine, like a day later, being like, "Is this my grave?" Like, yes, dude, it is your grave. It should be your grave. What the fuck are you doing on this mortal plane? Uh, of course, it would slightly kill the happy ending if somebody actually died, but it would make a lot of sense and would make his sacrifice into actually a sacrifice. Uh, and this would have just also avoided the constant meme that nobody ever dies. If there was ever a moment to do it, it was this. Baby's constant crying during the entire time is also annoying. That's my personal preference, but we know it's not getting anywhere, so. It's the first monarchy we save, you know. The Straw Hats have a tendency towards saving monarchies. I don't know if Luffy just has a personal like for it, but we seem to go from kingdom to kingdom, and if there's a monarchy, we make very sure to make sure that it either stays alive or comes back, which is mostly funny, not like an actual downside. Then we get to 13, Bharati. So Bharati is a great arc. It is full of just amazing moments and just has a really just high amount of high quality content every episode. Not just individual 3 minute moments, but just entire spans that are really fun to watch. Um, just to get started, Sanji's introduction and feeding in is amazing. We see Sanji's ideology here in clear spot. It's, tested with who he is and what Gin does. And we also see that, you know, he's a good person in that sense, right? Gin as a character also just elevates it with his, the initial resistance to it, but then just the gratitude and the acceptance of, you've saved my life. This is the tastiest thing I have ever eaten, right? And this is also where Luffy looks at Sanji and he doesn't see the amazing fighting or the amazing cooking and says, "Hey, we should get a cook." He sees this and he sees Sanji making this food for this guy, right? And that's like, okay, we should get this guy, right? Because he's a good guy and of course a good cook. But hey, it's nice to have that aspect. Then we have Mihawk coming by. So incredibly, incredibly good. Mihawk showing up just from the Grand Line, killing entire boats and fleets just because he's bored. Somebody woke up from a nap. He's just chilling. Uh, Mihawk is fantastic. The fight with Zoro itself is cool. Zoro's annoyance at the dagger. The fight itself. Zoro not stepping back with the knife at his heart because he feels like he could otherwise just not return to this point. Mihawk honoring him and just cutting him up, basically in half, but not killing him, and actively, asking the swordsman that, challenging him to, come to my height, and that he will stay the strongest until Zoro shows up, um, and giving him that challenge, and Zoro making the declaration that he will not lose again, and that he will become the greatest swordsman. Uh, to Luffy, not just to himself, to Luffy, right? And he just says, is that okay, Pirate King? And Luffy is just like, yep, fine with me. And it's so awesome. It's another moment of, Zoro showing his full loyalty and commitment to Luffy, which is all really badass, and powerful people kind of acknowledging them. Just amazing in that sense. Uh, it shows just bigger stakes, a bigger world, right? And Mihawk's visiting is really nice at that. We have some downsides though, or to be particular, we have one downside. The fight with Krieg drags on. Krieg as an antagonist or villain isn't a problem in itself, connecting into something, showing that Zeph shares Sanji's value there um, on a grander scale, and also giving the food to Krieg is nice. And the fight of demonstrating that Luffy will go through anything and just keep fighting until he wins is also nice, or fine at least, but it just takes too long, and so it starts to thin out the otherwise incredibly, thick and tense and amazing, minute by minute thing we were getting from Bharati. If that was cut down by an episode or so, would be even nicer. Then backstory, absolutely S tier. Sanji's backstory is amazing. It is really unique, even though in concept somebody starving isn't that unique. It is a unique enough concept executed in a unique manner. It is really memorable. It explains his character, the backstory. It includes specific parts that explain why he is who he is now, specifically with the ideology or personality we saw that made him give Gin food, even though he's of course a dubious figure to say the least. We also see, Zeph having that same backstory in a way for this aspect. The eating your own leg is really awesome. Sure, it's cut in the anime for censorship, but in the manga and in the live action, we see it. It just works out so beautifully. Seeing that appreciation, seeing why Sanji feels so indebted to Zeph and is willing to die or feels like he's obliged to. It's so good. It's an amazing backstory even for One Piece standards, and that is a high standard to hit. Mihawk also just kind of broadens the scope of the world. Previously, we were, kind of stronger than people showed up. Even now with Krieg, it just felt like somebody that Luffy's stronger against that kind of relies on quote unquote sheep tricks. But Mihawk kind of shows us that we are big fish in a small pond. That the East Blue is the weakest of the seas and that the Grand Line is the big pond. Mihawk is the big fish in the big pond. And if we go to the Grand Line, we will be the small fish in the big pond. And this is a grander world than Luffy's little escalade with a couple of crew members, right? And so Mihawk actually just plays an important role. Obviously the warlords, but it just gives us scope in the coolest way possible. And that's why Baratie is so high up. Who is next? It is Loguetown. Some people may be surprised to see it so high up because I feel some people don't appreciate it enough. Loguetown is an absolutely amazing arc. Loguetown is stuffed full of highlights while being quite short. So Sorry I'm Dead is like the main point of this arc and is an absolutely defining moment for Luffy as a character. It changes, perhaps only a little, but it solidifies how we see him, and it definitely establishes how some other characters see him, especially Smoker, and technically later Bartolomeo, but at this point he doesn't exist yet. But Luffy's willingness to accept death fully and completely when it is inevitably there is a scary thing that reminds Smoker of Roger. Um, and it's what incentivizes Roger, Smoker, to follow Luffy and chase him down. Not because he's a random pirate that got out or anything, but because he saw that and he sees that potential or threat that needs to be shut down because it could get out of hand, and it does. He was right, but he doesn't succeed. But yeah, so that trait shows us Luffy being, special in his own way, in a way that's not related to his fruit or anything, but more so his personality. And that's just nice to watch. Of course, the divine saving is also really cool. God himself intervenes, and he himself just casually comes out. Sanji is just like to Zoro, do you believe in God? Uh, because that is ridiculous, right? Dragon saves him there, and then again afterwards, also great. We then have Smoker's ice eating pants. So this is a classic save the cat moment. So in writing, there is a concept called kick the dog, save the cat. And the idea is that if you want to show that a character is evil, you have them kick a dog. And if you want to show that a character is good, you have them save a cat. So regardless of their position or how other people see them, you will give them a little private scene and you will show them kicking a dog or saving the cat to kind of establish to the audience that this is a good guy or this is a bad guy. And in Smoker, this comes in the form of a little girl and her ice cream. And even though he looks scary and she has, offended him in this petty way, he does not retaliate. He does not scold her. He's not angry, but he just is like, no, sorry, my pants ate your ice cream. Buy some more scoops, right? And it endears us to Smoker a bit, and we know that he's a good marine. He's an antagonist to Luffy, but he's not evil, right? And it's just a standout moment. The other standout moment, uh, close to Luffy's, is Zoro getting free swords. He doesn't have a lot of money, so he can only grab something from the bargain bin, and he grabs a cursed sword. He can tell it's cursed. Tashigi's there and kindly informs him of it, like the nerd she is, but Zoro knows. And he tests that curse of the sword against his luck, and he's willing to risk his arm for it, and he wins. His luck is higher, and he takes it, and it is really cool. It's really badass. He gets an amazing sword, and the shop owner also is amazed by this and just decides to give him another amazing named sword for free, passing on his dream in a way. And Zoro just getting 2 free swords out of pure badassery and aura farming is just great. And it's nice to see that he now has 3 named strong swords. Then we have the bar. This is an easy thing to forget. It's not great and grand, but Luffy gets lost and gets into this bar, Goldie Roger bar, and there's just an old dude and he doesn't have a lot of company because Smoker visits and they all run away from Smoker, which is understandable, to be fair. But he doesn't have customers, and Luffy joins, and this is again a moment where Luffy reminds somebody from the old times of Roger. And it's nice in the sense Luffy drinks some milk, and the old man decides, you know what, maybe if there's patrons like you around, maybe I'll stay. Maybe I'll stay open just a bit longer. It's not free of flaws, technically. Both Sanji's cook-off for the bluefin tuna and Usopp's duel for the glasses aren't great and kind of annoying, but they are anime editions. They're not in the manga, so technically, if you're going by manga standards, those downsides do not exist, and it is a just clean arc. It should just be noted that the arc is a lot of setup. It introduces important characters, but also concepts and things that happen. You know, we have Dragon, we have Smoker, we have the swords, we have the parallels for with Luffy, and of course this comes back with Bartolomeo. But we get all those important setup things and the start of the Grand Line while being incredibly fun to watch. And this is Loguetown is exactly how you do an arc of introducing, important things because it is just incredibly efficient and amazing to watch. We are now almost at the top 10. And just outside, we have Amazon Lily. So, Amazon Lily is something I personally enjoy, and I think something that gets underrated a bit due to kind of the arc it's in between. It is right after the most crushing defeat that the Straw Hats ever experienced, and just in an really emotional way, Kuma one-shotting everybody in a way where, of course, now we know he was practically saving them and they're safe, but from the perspective of the crew and from Luffy at the time, it looks like they're being killed or otherwise removed, they're gone, right? And we see him at the end with all others gone, and he's just on the floor like, I couldn't save even a single one, right? And it's brutal where we're just relatively we're running from the admirals, we're running from the Pacifista, we're running from Kuma, we're scrambling, and we still fail. Right, so it's really tense, and then it's followed by the ascending stakes and the ending of Impel Down and Marineford. So in between, we need a little breather, and that breather is Amazon Lily. But it doesn't try to do this with like just cheap comedy or something, or being irrelevant, but instead finds a nice balance of calming down a bit. Luffy gets to this island of women, the dream, uh, and they run into him. They don't know what he's like 'cause he's a man, and that's a bit funny, right? He gets food, they like him, he gets some casual conversations. So we have a bit of a breather there. And then we have Boa, who's generally entertaining, but Luffy landing in her bath gives us the highlight of just Luffy's immunity. Boa, you know, can turn anyone to stone that is attracted to her, and that basically crosses all borders. Age, gender, kind of ignores it. But Luffy's asexual, and it seems he's so aggressively asexual that even Boa's like perfection of attractiveness can't get through to him, right? And that means that Boa kind of encounters something that she hasn't before, and her perception of men kind of fails against Luffy, which kind of forces her to think about it differently. And he wins over Boa, right? Which becomes very adorable after he shows that he doesn't judge her for her, slave past, and that he even resisted the celestial dragons by smacking one just right in the face. And of course, generally he's a character that stands for freedom. Um, he wins her over, of course, after only after the next part, which is the arena. So Luffy's fight in the arena is amazing. It's really fun, of course, having your candidate fight in an arena is cool as he impresses people, um, and fighting the fighting the sisters is fun and impressive in the fight itself, as they kind of with haki struggle to beat him who has none of it, right? And then Sandersonia's back is exposed, and her kind of slave history would be revealed, and the sisters' past would be exposed, and they might be screwed. And Luffy protects her, right? Even though they're just trying to kill him, and they're abusing the statues as power, right? And that's where he kind of takes the extra step towards proving to Boa that he is actually the impossible of like a good man, and wins her over just a bit more. And we also get, after he does beat them, um, Boa does that extra step of like, oh, I'll let you get out of here, or free the girls. And without hesitation, he chooses to free his friends, to unpetrify the girls, and that's like the final step. And then Boa is a simp for life. But Luffy's just repeatedly badass and unique in this arc, in a way where we don't feel super stressed about stakes because that's kind of separate, but we're still happy to see him win. And then we have, of course, in the arena fight, we see his first real Conqueror's Haki moment. Of course, it's subconscious, and technically, in Saboti, we kind of see him just knock out a bull, um, which seems to be like a kind of little bit of a weak Conqueror's Haki on the animal. But this is the first time we actually see him use it. Seeing the reactions to it is always great. Seeing him knock out that many people. So even though it's easy to forget, especially in the arena fight and the surrounding things, there's so many awesome things. Downsides, just the one thing I can really think of is the whole Bald's gig, where he's a man, so they notice that he has weird mushrooms between his legs, and they try to burn them off, and uh, it's a bit weird and awkward, and it's kind of like the joke of that sort kind of begs to be made in a scenario of like first man all these women have ever seen. But it ends up kind of mediocre, and there's like some miscommunications, which are always painful to watch. Overall, though, just great. Boa's backstory is rough. It's relatively short. We just kind of see that she was a slave, and now she made it out. But the arc overall is just pretty short, while having the amazing highlights. Winning over Boa, who's just fun to watch from there on out and afterwards. And I think it's just a great arc, and I think it's the perfect thing in between Saboti and the Marineford saga. We are finally in the top 10. Arlong Park. Arlong Park is a very defining arc in One Piece, I think. Even people that wouldn't put it in their top 10 would definitely agree that it's key and a very good arc. When it comes to the highlights, Help Me is one of the most iconic scenes in the entire anime. It still holds up. If you rewatch it, if you reread it, the emotions still hit you. It's set up just the right way, where you feel for that so much. We've seen where this is coming from for Nami and her original resistance to the help, and Luffy's just willingness to commit to that. Of course I will. And he doesn't actually know her backstory. All he knows is that, Arlong made her navigator cry, and he breaks into Arlong Park, and it's just, which one's Arlong, because he has no clue. But it doesn't matter. The others know, and they will fight. And if Luffy knew, he would, also fight. But he doesn't need to. We also get the bounty, which is really nice because first bounty, always cool. Bounty reveals are hype. It's the first one. Most of the fight with Arlong is fun. the jaws, the kicks, the hits, him getting stuck in the ground and kind of making everything much more difficult for everybody is just annoying. But you know, it happens. Usopp stepping up during his fight is nice. He's a coward and runs away, but once he realizes that Shu will actually, he's successfully faked his death. But once he realizes that Shu will now go back and attack his friends and Luffy, etc., um, he finally, steps up and is like, wait, right, and overcomes his fear to help his friends, and that's Usopp at his best, I think. And then I think incredibly underrated, I believe. Arlong is a very good villain, and not in just the very evil, hateable way, but one thing that really cemented Arlong for me as a good villain is the scene where he comes back to Arlong Park after Zoro just cut the shit out of everybody there. And there's a bunch of fishermen dead or defeated, depending on how you see it. And he gets there and he's just horrified and he just says, like, what happened here, my brothers, right? And you can see similar things like when Luffy uses one of his fishermen as a shield, and Arlong is just upset by that. Later we see by Hody, for example, who uses his own fishermen as shields. So Arlong cares for his fellow fisherman friends to a large degree, you know? Like sincerely he cares for them, and he's racist and looks down on humans, but we see that there's a, past sincere reason for that, and we see that he actually does care for his brothers, for his fellow fishermen. And that makes him less of a surface level cheap racist and more of a character that is definitely evil and definitely deserves to be beaten the shit out of, but has some depth to it, right? And it makes us appreciate it just a bit more. But of course, the arc does have a little bit of downsides. Luffy being stuck is just annoying. It happens a couple times in the earlier arcs, mostly just because Luffy is stronger than everybody there by a good chunk and immune to bullets. So to kind of not have Luffy fight everybody and win instantly all at once, Oda just gets him stuck in various ways, so that so that there's active problems and the others get to fight. But it's still annoying every time. Backstory of Nami is amazing. It's great. We understand. We can follow the trauma. It's brutal in a simple way. Um, we didn't have to be fishermen. The story would have worked with just other people, but we follow it, and we follow it over a very large amount of time, right? Like from her early childhood to where she is now, to the recent time. And we see her accumulation of the backstory, which is the collection of the money for Arlong and her sacrificing her life to pay out of this. We see that accumulate right as the Straw Hat gets there and it's taken away, right? All that build up, all that suffering that we know she went through, um, for that money taken away, and it's just the perfect boiling point for the help me scene. It gives us hatreds towards the antagonist. It makes us want to see them get beat the fuck up. It is a beautiful backstory, and yeah, only One Piece can do equally or better backstories. It's great. Now then, number 9, Whole Cake Island. Whole Cake Island is longer than you'd think. It's actually 100 episodes. A bit slow in the sense of zero point 0.8 chapters per episode, but a very good arc. It has quite a few upsides and is overall a very unique arc. So, such as Arlong Park that we established now, we've had a pretty standard and consistent formula where the Straw Hats get to an island. There's somebody trying to take over the island or some other, evil person controlling things. Maybe it's a village, maybe it's the entire country, and we jump in and we need to save them. And everybody gets paired against somebody. Luffy fights the big bad guy after somebody gets hurt, and Luffy wins. We have a party and we continue on. And Whole Cake Island is one of the islands that shifts that heavily. The other most notable one is of course, the Marineford saga where Luffy does his little one-of adventure. But when we're actually including the crew, Whole Cake is very unique because we only take a couple of people and we're going to a place with an intention, right? We're not drifting somewhere and encountering problems. We know where we're going, we know our goal, and it is to assassinate an emperor. We're teaming up with people we otherwise don't like. And yeah, it's just unique in that setup, which was bound to give us some interesting things. And it gives us, plot points and story developments we wouldn't get in normal arcs, and it frees us from some of the stereotypes that we otherwise run into. Let's get to some of the highlights. So right away, Luffy versus Katakuri. Generally, just Katakuri is fantastic. I think here you can see him and his donuts. It's just hilarious. His little mini backstory of beating the shit out of anybody who dared to make fun of him, and then they retaliated by beating up his little siblings. So he started covering it, and now he's this super badass, cool guy, hiding his ugly mouth. Uh, but then it's kind of revealed that that's not really what matters. In the fight versus Luffy, which is generally amazing, at some point, Flampe hits Luffy with, a poison dart, and she's like his number one fan, voted the cutest sister, and she is like somebody who idolizes the idol, and paints a picture of them, an idealized picture in her head of what Katakuri is like. And when Katakuri takes off his kind of, wrap and shows his mouth, he breaks that picture that she had of him. And she's a pretentious little shit, so instead of like some realization, she's like, "Oh, you're so ugly. I can't believe I liked you." But Luffy and Katakuri don't care. That's not what it's about. Um, he proceeds to stab himself as one of the most metal and manly things I've ever seen, which is odd for self-harm, but the way it happens, followed by them clashing with Conqueror's Haki and knocking out all the little side spectators, is just amazing. It's so cool. Katakuri is so badass. After the fight, um, Brule, who's been watching him and knows his things, through the mirrors, takes care of him as just, his sister that knows him for who he is and loves and cares for him. Really sweet. That fight alone was great. Then we have Brook the Thief. Stealing is kind of fun when you're successful, but the stake of stealing the poneglyphs, especially when we thought he had failed, because he didn't have anything with him, but it turned out he copied them and put them, stored them in his head, not in the usual way, but in the paper sense of a skull. Just amazing, and like the relief and like being like, oh shit, we actually stole the poneglyphs. That's it's just nice. Classic is Jinmei leaving Big Mom's crew, and that's usually impossible because she does not like that sort of thing, and so she will make you kind of pick stay or life, and if you're scared of her, then you just die if you try to leave. But Jinbei hits her with, I can't, I'm gonna be crew member of the King of the Pirates. I can't be intimidated by a mere emperor. And it's so fucking cold. Just really badass and real highlight. Sanji and Pudding are also fantastic. Sanji usually has like two gags, one of which is cooking and one of which is like swooning around or nose bleeding around any hot women that show up, like Nami. But Whole Cake arc is of course his arc in a way. Uh, Most of the time though, not in that like character relevant of a way of him being different, but when he's actually with Pudding, when he's cooking the cake for Big Mom, we just see him in a way we haven't really before. His interactions with Pudding are really cute after he first, sees her third eye and is impressed by it, and that's how he wins her over, right? And sees Sanji interacting positively with a hot woman with big boobs who likes him in just a nice way, and it's so fun to watch, and it's so like, we just wish the best for him. We just like, I ship it for once, Sanji, go for it. You've actually won her over, and not by swooning like a brain dead idiot. Reiju is fun, while she drops, just a little minor thing. Of the family members, of course she's the most likable because she's on Sanji's side more so, but just in general. An easy thing to forget is also Nami steals Zeus from Big Mom, which is just, hilarious, using very tasty clouds to steal a power of one of the emperors of the sea. Beautiful that it works. It does have some downsides though. Um, the first one is going to be a controversial take. Sanji's backstory is not good. Um, yeah, yeah. Sanji's backstory is not good. In an empty setting where we don't have a setup of any sort, this would be a very sad backstory, and it would be a good backstory. However, it is very generic. Um, it's just in comparison to his original backstory, it's just weak. This is a generic setup of basically what can be summed down to as my dad isn't proud of me, right? Of course, in the most abusive way possible, but this could basically apply to any character. And then they wove in a bit of like cooking for his mom to have some connection to who he is as a person, but most of it and the core of it is completely generic. And they needed a backstory, like a new backstory for Sanji to justify, a crew member being, somehow connected and being sold off to Big Mom. And this just pales in comparison to the original backstory he has with Zev. It doesn't add anything. It's very sad, but if you pay a bit of attention, note that it's generically sad, and not particularly sad, which pull it down a bit for me. But mostly, it just didn't pull it up for me. So many other people I know very much like it, and if they're thinking of how good is Whole Cake, they're like, oh, Sanji's backstory, right? I disagree. Maybe you disagree with that, but let's continue here. Cracker was annoying. He just took too long to fight in a boring way. So sometimes Whole Cake can be slow. It's 95 episodes, and because it doesn't have the normal structure, uh, of course there's different things happening, but it also lacks a bit of structure in direction, so it can kind of bounce back and forth, unsure of where directly to go, without trying to make it feel too short, but with getting all the important plot points. Lastly, Sanji waiting so long. We have the scene of, yeah, basically we have Sanji just kind of being reluctant to join Luffy again, right? To the point where he's actively fighting back Luffy because he doesn't want Luffy to face the wrath of an emperor, right? And while that's understandable, again, in a Void, it is the exact same plot that we had with Robin. We have the, greater grand power that seems oh so powerful, and we have Robin giving herself up and going with this greater power to avoid Luffy and the Straw Hats having to face them because they would surely be obliterated, and the Straw Hats and Luffy insisting that we will fight and face whatever is needed for you as our crewmate. And Sanji was one of those crewmates that did that. He even had his little individual solo adventures on the train and stuff. And the conclusion was that we get Robin back. Robin wants to live, right? And Sanji just copies this backstory and this backstory. Sanji copies this motivation one to one, and it's annoying because we've seen it before, and it's annoying because Sanji should know this, right? He should know Luffy will not give up on this. It's kind of out of character for him to leave the crew for this reasoning, even if it's a reasonable thing to do from a neutral perspective. Sanji's been with us long enough to know, and to just one could very much expect for him to just say, "Oh, hey, sorry, crew. In a way, I've baited an emperor." Luffy's already done that anyways. It's yeah. So I dislike Sanji's motivation here, kind of, and his heavy reluctance to join Luffy, and so that kind of undercuts some of the motivation of the arc. Despite all those complaints about Sanji's original motive here being just kind of a copied version of Robin's story, and the specific backstory. The arc is generally so fun. It's unique. The fight with Katakuri stands out. There's just a lot of high stakes, and the people we bring with us, they stand up to those high stakes. So really fun to watch, and still deserves to be number 9 on the list. Now, what is next? We get to Punk Hazard. So something people are kind of torn on. Punk Hazard's cool, but some people rate it pretty lowly. Um, I fully disagree. Um, mm, to a large degree, or to some degree, because I'm a massive Law fan. But let's be real, who in their right mind isn't a Law fan? He's just so cool. Um, the character swaps are just funny in the right situations. Swapping souls, Tashigi with Smoker is funny. Frankie being put in a chopper's body and talking with his weird expressions, and Robin just being like, "Don't ever talk again" in Chopper's body, uh, is lovely. Law and Smoker versus Virgo is an amazing fight. Seeing Smoker cooperate and with a pirate, which he would usually be very opposed to, but just because specifically Virgo has been betraying him in that sense and helping Law. The fight itself is cool. Law gets, of course, the shit kicked out of him, but uh, loses his hat and all. But when he then like finally just gets his heart back and manages to open the room and just cuts not just Virgo but the entire building in half. Uh, Gets his hat back, cuts Virgo up. Super cool. Just an awesome fight. Law's alliance with Luffy, they're at the top of the mountain, and Law just says, "Hey, let's take down Emperor," and Luffy is down. As long as it's not Shanks, I'm gonna take down all of them anyway. So as long as we don't start with Shanks, I'm good. And they're just general alliance throughout, and co-op as Law kind of realizes what a fucking mess of a alliance he just got himself into. Another cute little thing, Law with Chopper is adorable and hilarious. Uh, Chopper can't move, so he's tied onto Law as like the doctor to help the kids. And you can see it, you can't fully see it in the picture here, but Luffy and Frankie are laughing their ass off in the background. You can't look cool when you have Chopper tied to your head. So hilarious, and even once he's like tied to the sword, just very cute. Caesar is fun sometimes. He's just somebody you really want to see get punched in the face really hard, but his kind of like stupidity sometimes and chalk just makes it fun to watch. No Hockey Needed was a really cool moment. Uh, Monet, is beating up Zoro, or not beating him up, but he's not really like fully fighting back, and she starts to suspect that he can't actually attack her because he can't hurt her or win because Zoro will not cut women, and Tashigi is also there, and she, interprets it that way too. And he's like, "Don't worry, I got you. I'll win." And she, fights instead. But then Zoro is just like, yeah, like, have you ever seen? Of course, there are things I don't want to cut, but have you ever seen, a wild animal that you were absolutely certain would not strike, right? And he cuts Monet in half, and he doesn't use Haki, otherwise she'd be dead. And that realization just stuns her for quite a long time, to the point where even Tashigi can kill her. Uh, and it is such a badass way to win a fight. Uh, yeah, absolute highlight. Monet being stopped, this is separate. So at the end of the arc, the Strides have generally won, and Monet is at the self-destruct device, and it'll blow everybody up except Caesar, and then they'll pick him up, and Doflamingo calls her, and he's like, I'm sorry to make you do this. The self-destruct button is located, and Monet is already there, and she's injured, and she's basically, I love you, young master, and I will do this, and it's looking bad for a moment, and then Caesar stabs the heart that he thinks is Law's and kills her. Um, and so it's kind of a self-destruct thing. Fun to watch to get it stopped in that moment, and Caesar kind of hurting himself. And lastly, and definitely not least, one of the coolest moments, maybe the coolest moment in the arc. Easy to forget because it happens after the Straw Hat leave, but Doflamingo gets there and he goes to kill Smoker, and it looks like Smoker's pretty, screwed. And out of nowhere, Kuzan shows up. We haven't really seen him since. He's the admiral, right? He's an admiral that like one-shot our crew. He's an admiral that has done insane things. We know how powerful he is. He's like the half the reason why the entire island looks like how it looks. And just out of nowhere, in this, more casual, different outfit than we saw him in before, his hair more covered, the ice just stops Dofi, right? And he just Doflamingo just like his hand stops mid-air as he's about to go for Smoker. You know, step aside, like, could you please step aside? That's my friend, right? And Dofi still tries to go for the kill, but gets stopped by Kuzan, and it's so cool, such an amazing moment. Aokiji is always great, but in this particular scenario, of course, that extra step. So, while, yeah, on the downside side, it can be a lot of running around, like they're running from the gas, they're running here, they're running there. So sometimes there's not much progress in the development, but most of the time there is. Unlike something like, I don't know, Alabasta or something, where you are running for a while, but not a lot happening until you get to the end. In Punk Hazard, there are a lot of highlights. Law is just generally always a pleasure, but there's a lot of cool moments, and it sets up for the rest of the Dressrosa arc, and so it is a personal favorite of mine, mm, and prepares for the things to come. Now, number 7, we have Reverie. So, Reverie's arc that's kind of difficult to place because it's kind of like, those episodes after arcs where we get updates on what's happening in the world, and the Strahds get a new bounty, and usually we just finished an arc and we're recovering before we go to the next arc. But Reverie is an arc of just stuff like that, right? The meaning of the kings, the royal meeting, and it is amazing. We get so many just amazing developments, unlike the normal fights we have, right? So we get, massive reveals about the world. We get grand decisions about how the world is going to change, made by people that we actually have run into, because since we're going around saving monarchies all the time, we have quite a few royal friends. So we get to see them, there. We run into, we run into Emu. We don't run into Emu. Actually, Sabo does, but we kind of get that reveal. We get the elders reveal. We have the revolutionary army like fully attack, like something we would previously dream of, and the revolutionary army just goes and does it, and just full scale attack. Well, not full scale, I suppose, but like massive scale attack. All the officers go and like cause massive damage, save Kuma. We have, admirals like, betraying the government mid-fight. Absolutely sick, Fujitora. All the grand stuff happening. Uh, there's like the little Luffy fan club on the side, you know. The various monarchies we've saved have given us a couple of like big titty hourglass figure princesses of various sizes, and Karoo, to, happily talk about Luffy. There's Leo and Sai, also royalty, who are, part of Luffy's fleet, and they can all talk about Luffy and about how amazing he is, and looking forward to all these things. And they're just a cute interaction, and we also just kind of see, uh, some forces for good in the system, right? Then a bit separate, when they're getting the royals up to the Reverie, Garp is walking with the degenerate, uh, upgraded, adopted brother of Sabo. Uh, and, after going up to royalty, to king of the country by questionable means, he's obsessed with power and wealth, and in this very scumbag way. And, he asks Garp, like, hey, do you have some connections? I want to become a celestial dragon. And Garp just hits him with, oh, you want to be a scumbag? And it is so just, it's such a Luffy thing to do. It's such a Garp thing to do. The whole family, their disregard for those rules and offending people and authority. And Garp's just like, yeah, yeah, Celestial Dragon are scum. And then he's like, oh, whoops, my bad. But because he's the hero of the Marines, he can get away with that sort of thing. And watching somebody just nicely, explicitly do that right there is just very fun to watch. Overall, The Reverie is just it's difficult to grade because it's not Luffy in the crew and it's not the usual things, but the actual just like insane shit that happens, the joy you get from watching the episodes, the massive developments and things that you know will have massive impact on the world and the Straw Hats, the abolishing of the warlord system, all these things are amazing, and that's why I place it so highly, even though it can be hard to grade. We are almost in the top five. We have Impel Down. Amazing arc. Yeah, I mean, prison escape. We're, we have high stakes because we have to get out as fast as possible. But there's so many things that make it amazing. So we have Bonchan. I mean, we run into him early, and he accompanies us through the rest of the escape, the way down, the way up, and he is ride or die. Since he was already, somewhat of a friend when he was still an antagonist in Arabasta, uh, the upgrade of friendship makes him go to, full best buddy compared to like Mr. Three or something who kind of joins and is somewhat allied but not exactly a friend. Bon is an absolute just amazing. Uh, Watching him, go through whatever he needs to protect Luffy, dragging Luffy's poisoned body, through the ice and uh, whatever pain may be necessary while trying to find the Okama Queen, Ivankov. Uh, he's just amazing to watch, and he makes the whole thing possible. And of course, his willingness, you know, he gives his life so that the others can escape, and it is just an amazing sacrifice. He actually, dies instead of a cheap fake one. He fully gives his life in just a really heroic manner that can't be undone. He is so manly. Like you can look at him and say like how, but you know it. Like if you've seen the arc, you know it. Bon is a real man in every best way possible, and just absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I've looped on that for a bit too much, but I think Bon Chanda deserves it. With Buggy and Yaldino, Mr. Three, um, they're just a great comedic pair. They're also occasionally useful. Uh, Buggy riles up with his usual bluffery, with his falling upward. Actually riles up, the inmates and arguably allows for the escape to happen because maybe Luffy wouldn't have, Luffy wouldn't care about all those things on the side. also personally enjoyed was Magellan one-shotting Blackbeard's crew. Uh, we know Blackbeard at this point. We already know that Blackbeard was like the problem here, or at least the start of the problem, right? And seeing Magellan just one-shot his entire crew, like I don't have time to deal with you, and just one-shot them is fucking hilarious and satisfying. Of course, he gets out by luck with Shiryu coming to save him, right? Kind of on the side. But Teach kind of lives in a similar wigging it attitude as Luffy does sometimes. So Luffy would be dead to Magellan if it wasn't for the specifically Eva-chan here, and Teach would also be dead. So we see some of their similarities again. Teach is like, he has this grand plan, but he's also kind of careless. So it's interesting. They also, interacts with Luffy. It's like Sky Island did exist, right? And of course, Luffy's not gonna kindly have a chat with him, but it's fun either way. Yeah, just Luffy just makes the impossible possible here, and the whole thing is just a delight to watch. Downside wise, there are none. I legit, it's a long arc, and there's a lot of things happening, but I legit cannot think of a sincere problem with the arc. That's how good it is. And we slowly approach or quickly approach Marineford, the accumulation of many episodes of things happening, of a couple episodes of things happening long ago, the stakes continuously rising, and now we soon finally reach the war. Number 5. People like to put Marineford after Impel Down, but not the case this time. For number 5, we have Sabaody Archipelago. Sabaody is an absolutely excellent arc. Because it's relatively short and because it doesn't have, Luffy's normal, saga of fighting a big bad and then defeating them, people write it off, especially because they kind of focus on the Marineford saga coming up right afterwards, right? Um, but Sabaody is absolutely excellent and has enough content to be worth the top 5 spot here. It has so many highlights, and I think the number one that everybody knows is Luffy punching Charlos back into the manga. So even in the anime, uh, it just hits him so hard that it goes back into a manga panel. Similar to how he punched Bellamy, just not even using his devil fruit, right? Just the raw punch. And the satisfaction we see from that absolute degenerate piece of shit, Charlos, who can't even be bothered to walk, and uh, stupid snot buying our friends, shooting, Hachan, who recently got redeemed. Uh, Seeing Luffy, just the single punch is so incredibly satisfying and is arguably just the most satisfying hit in the entire show. We also have Rayleigh, we just kind of it just kind of drops it out of nowhere, like it just shows us a random prisoner, and then it's like, yeah, by the way, this is the right hand man of the Pirate King. Uh, Also, he likes young girls. And then we see him just kind of being a mysterious badass. Uh, after Luffy punches Charlos, he comes out and just shows us the first like active use of Conqueror's Haki, wiping everybody out, establishing his threat further. Just another back-to-back badass moment with Kid and Law being also there. Fantastic. Uh, we have the whole thing of getting Kumad. It's Luffy's defeat at Sabaody is absolutely, crucial. It shows to Luffy and the rest of the crew that they are too weak for the New World. That they're currently trying to get to the New World. That's the whole point, right? They're trying to get to Fishman Island, but this shows that they're too weak. From Luffy's perspective, Kuma just potentially killed all of them, and he couldn't save any. Seeing them, struggle, doing everything they can to somehow bring down a pacifista, Chopper, going beast form, monster point. It's not enough, Robin trying for help, but nothing works. We see Kid and Law also trying to beat a pacifista. Meanwhile, An admiral is here, just casually like 1v10ing a bunch of other supernovas, and Rayleigh is stopping him again. Him being badass. So much cool stuff happening. The worst generation is interesting while we still see them alive. Bonnie turning a bunch of people into kids or old people. We see the ancient zone from X-Drake, which looks cool. Rouge seems mostly like a chill guy. Um, and just seeing Borsellino just casually like one-shot them without really much of a problem. And there's of course Law, who's badass as fuck and remains a favorite of mine. We see him, first interacting with stuff. Kid, of course, a bit more evil, but still a cool fruit and cool powers and cool interactions. The worst generation is great. We are introduced to the celestial dragons, and in a very efficient and effective manner, get to see just the complete degenerate pieces of shit they are. Charlos is like the ultimate example. He's got the snot dripping out of his nose. He arbitrarily shoots people. He has a stupid voice. Everything, right? But we see it in the others too. The entitlement, the self grandiose perspective that they don't even want to breathe the same air, that humans are garbage that they can ride, and that they can just shoot whoever, and they're protected by the Navy admirals, right? Just yeah, seeing Luffy punch one was satisfying enough. Seeing Zoro just try to kill one was also just hilarious, just to kind of demonstrate that Zoro too would be willing to do it, although he wasn't aware of the consequences. And then the last kind of highlight of me from the arc here is that Luffy regroups before the whole Kuma thing, regroups with Rayleigh and Chucky, and they're all in the bar. And there's two things here. One is Usopp, being the annoying little shit that he is, asks Rayleigh if the One Piece is real, basically, or where it is. And Luffy interrupts him and is just, like, shut the fuck up. I don't want to know where it is. I don't even want to know if it exists. Everybody goes to sea to find out for themselves, and I would rather die than set out on a boring adventure like that. To which impresses Shaki and Rayleigh a bit. And Robin, yeah, also denies the option because she wants to find out herself about the Void Century and all. And then Rayleigh asks him, can you do it, right? Can you conquer the Grand Line? Can you conquer such a sea? And Luffy just hits him with, I don't want to conquer anything. Just that the Pirate King is the person that is with the most freedom in the world. And that kind of fully wins over Rayleigh and Shaki. Shaki's like, really starting to like you, Monkey-chan. And it's again similar to in Loketown when he accepts his death, just showing his unique personality and drive and impressing people with it. And that's just always fun to watch. Downside, no, none. I can't think of anything. Uh, it's so much just awesomeness and highlights packed into episode after episode for 21 straight episodes. Important things happen, but they're both cool and emotional in sadder ways. Fantastic arc. It shows the crew current weakness in their inability, in their failure, while giving us a chance to recollect in 2 years, right? So definitely one of my favorites, especially of the shorter arcs. Just great. Now, number 4, Dressrosa. So, Dressrosa is somewhat controversial, mostly just for its length, or for the pacing to be exact. Dressrosa can feel incredibly slow, especially in the anime. So we see here it has 118 episodes, but it's also relatively slow in, 0.86 chapters per episode, and you just feel like you're not making a lot of progress at times. The many things that start happening simultaneously at some point, yeah, it can just be problematic. So in general, Dressrosa is an absolute fantastic arc. Doflamingo is a crazy, flamboyant evil. He's one of the best villains, if not the best villain in the entire anime. He's fun to watch. It's fun to watch him spiral. It's fun to watch him lecture because there's truth to what he says, to some of it at least. He has really mastered his devil fruit, and that shows just as an example to Luffy of what you can get to, because it does feel like his fruit is strong, but also just that he's using it well, compared to just like the fruit is just mega overpowered. And he's just fun to watch. He's strong in a way that makes us want to beat him. Just lovely. Fujitora is great to have, just as the gambling man intro, sending the cheaters to hell. But he's also just generally cool, and his dislike towards the warlords, his power, his willingness to fight Sabo and kind of stall. He doesn't actually, you know, want to fight. Because if he beats Sabo or something, or if the fight ends, then he has his responsibilities to hunt down Luffy and the other problem causers. But because he's not he's against Doflamingo basically, right? So he just kind of smoothly works that in. Bartolomeo is just a delight once we figure out that he's just a big Luffy fanboy. It's great to have him as a Luffy fanboy because, he's a great fanboy of the Strides, but he's also actually useful and productive. His fruit is really strong, and he doesn't like just be annoying, he's just delighted, and then will just do whatever Luffy or the Straw Hats say and be actually good at that. And that's why he's just so fun to have around. Law is awesome. Law is an amazing character. Law is so fucking cool. Law is, it's a devil fruit. He's just great. And we see him a lot in this arc because it's his arc to a large degree, right? His fights, him traveling around, even just him being carried by Luffy on the bull, uh, as he recharges his power, his interactions with Doflamingo, his conversations, his establishing of, you know, I will take you down for Corazon, his setup with Luffy and the plans, just amazing. Luffy winning Block C is really fun, as Lucy, of course. Uh, Fighting people left and right, and then the lovely finisher with the Conqueror's Haki fight against Don Shinjao, who keeps blaming him for what Garp did, and then Luffy just sets his head straight. Fun. The Colosseum is fun in general in those situations, and seeing Luffy get out of it in this nice little fancy manner while winning over so many people is just great. Sugar's curse being undone is an amazing moment. Seeing the country just change, the feign of peace and happiness unraveled as everybody gets their memories back, as all the people that had opposed Rosa Doflamingo being turned back into people ready for resistance, right? Everybody being remembered, including important characters, even somebody such as Robin, who is turned into a toy very shortly. Pika's voice is funny. It's a funny idea to make the big guy so high pitched, and Luffy and Zoro just laughing their ass off about it is just great. Zoro just having beef with him. Uh, Fun to watch. Little gimmick. The Colosseum joining Luffy, basically all of the strongest fighters, works as a kind of reminder and incarnation of what Mihawk said about him in Marineford, which is that his greatest power, it's not some cheap trick, it's not a devil fruit. His greatest power is that he slowly but surely turns all the enemies or people around him into his allies, right? And we see how strong and important that can be as those fighters end up actually being useful and taking care of the commanders that Doflamingo has. God Usopp is really funny. Him getting 500 million as a bounty pay Dofi is just, lovely. The all the misunderstandings that he tries to tell, and they, take him as the holy savior. Just fun and fantastic. And he's also actually useful when he snipes and prevents Sugar from permanently removing Luffy and Law from the plot. Saba's return is cool, We didn't see him before, but we were introduced to him enough in the backstory. And Luffy's delight is similar to ours. Well, obviously greater, but it's just so awesome having him. And it's of course also awesome having such a massive force join your side, right? Suddenly, oh, by the way, the number one's your dad, and the number two of the Revolution Army, he's here, and he's willing to drop his position to help, right? Fantastic, really cool. Somebody to eat the fire fruit. Connected to Sabo is Koala. Koala, being alive and also having learned fisherman karate is such a satisfying little twist. Um, for those of you who don't realize or remember, Koala was the little human girl that Fisher Tiger and Jimbei and the Sun Pirates um, took along to bring back to her parents. And she was terrified of fishermen, and she just didn't say anything, and she was worried about getting beaten. And slowly they kind of, warmed her up to it to fishermen, and in the end, the humans and her parents still sold them out and got attacked. But knowing that, she survived and she became a fisherman supporter to the degree where she actually learned fisherman karate from some fisherman trainer, maybe Huck, is just nice. Also seeing Robin kind of being able to interact with him because we know that she was who she was hanging out with, right? Training in the Revolutionary Army. Now we have more highlights. The backstories. I have my own category for backstories, but there's so many amazing backstories in Dressrosa that it feels like it needs to be mentioned. Uh, Law's backstory may just still be my favorite in all of One Piece. Dofi's is such a crazy and insane setup that doesn't really make us feel that bad for him, but we do just respect the absolute insanity that is him and his backstory, and is a sufficiently crazy backstory for such a crazy character. Because it would be kind of cheap if it's just like, oh, he's just a crazy dude, or just super evil. He is super evil, but we have, an understanding to it. Even just little mini things like Baby Five short backstory that she was basically, said to be excessive and a waste and a drain on people, and throw it away. Baby Five isn't like a title name. It's like just like from the Don Quixote Pirates or something. It's just her mother just was like, yeah, this she didn't even get a name, right? This is just baby number five, and baby number five is a drain, and that's where her need to please people comes from to this extent. And that's how we also get to the next point of her getting married to Sai, who originally doesn't want to and asks her to kill herself, and then is like, wait, don't actually do that, and then fights his dad so that he can marry her. uh, and they actually get together, and it succeeds. It's so sweet. She never seemed like actively evil, so we're more able to just kind of forgive her for being part of the pirates, especially that we see, like that she's reasonably nice with Law in the backstory as well. So all of a sudden, over the course of a couple minutes, I'm for like, all right, I hope he wins to like, I hope they get married, which is a wild jump. Keeping on the side of generals on the Dokihard pirates, we have Senor Pink, who is again the absolute peak of masculinity. He has an extended kind of fight with Frankie, with the high values of manliness and masculinity and being hard boiled, and they pretend to not take damage from the hits while protecting kittens or something, and Frankie gets him out of the way by telling him that it's none of your business, but I saw an old woman struggling on a street on the side there. And he's like, well, on an unrelated note, I have to go check something out. And all the women constantly fainting around him as he's just this dude, like kind of fat looking dude in a diaper, baby outfit, with a pacifier. He just looks like the dumbest thing you've ever seen. Then you grow a bit closer to him because, of his manly approach here, his hard-boiled personality. And then you get his backstory. Holy shit. Also, absolutely one of my favorite backstories, just because it's so incredibly unique. Like you see the weird design, you're like, how is this gonna get justified? And then you see his backstory, and how it made me cry. Just one episode out of nothing, and then just seeing that he went from these suits to those things because his wife got stunned and it's kind of like got put into a coma, and it's kind of his fault because he was lying about his job because she hates pirates. And he just gives that explanation at the end because at some point he drops by and he wears the little hat that the baby, and she smiles, and then he just completely pivots over and wears all of them and she smiles, and he gives that explanation of these outfits are worth more to me than any suit money, because when I wear these clothes is the only times that I see you smile, right? And suddenly he's just like one of the coolest, manliest characters you ever know. And he looks stupid, but if you know, then you're just like, God, so awesome. And One Piece just hits you with that sort of thing sometimes. Senor Pink, amazing. Sabo winning the fruit is fun, just a little fight, but he manages to get it, destroys the arena, and just the fact that they didn't want anybody to actually get it, but Sabo got it nonetheless, and seeing the cool fruit on somebody we like, of course, nice. The birdcage is just a cool concept. The psychological, terror and problems that it creates as people start to turn on each other, partly through your use of parasite string, but just also through the threat of the birdcage and Doflamingo's promises of money. Really cool, and also a nice little, uh, setup to justify everything being locked out. Law using his OP fruit, really cool. We get a bunch of different uses. Even just Shambles alone gets some nice ones. His combo with Luffy, as Luffy just runs into him with Gum Gum Red Hawk, and then last moment Law swaps and lets it hit Dofi and cuts up uh, the lovely clubs guy. Is just lovely. Mm, and just a cool way to use the fruit. Then we finally get Gear 4. I mean, I say finally, it's not like we were awaiting it, but we get Gear 4, new transformation. The fight is sick. We have a, full uh, announcer narrating the entire fight, cheering up Luffy and cheering up the entire country, motivating them to help out. And, Dofi finally getting beat in by Luffy is just incredibly satisfying after all the evils we've seen. Fujitora letting Luffy go is also just nice because we like Fujitora because we know, kind of like Smoker, he has a moral compass. He dislikes the warlord system, and he first, has the dice, and he, as Luffy and the rest are recovering, he rolls the dice, and every day he rolls it, and if it lands on anything except a one, he'll go and capture him. But it keeps rolling on one, and Sengoku shows up, which is also cool, and finally he doesn't, and they go and to chase down Luffy as he's finally recovered and running, and he just grabs up all the rubble and plans to send it to Luffy, destroy the ship and everything. And all the people, the citizens go, and they are there and they talk and they're like, basically loud. So Fujitora knows they're there, and Akainu would have just killed them all. But Fujitora actually has, not that absolute justice, and so he knows what's going on, but he still doesn't send it. And he just says that he regrets cutting out his eyes, and he wonders what Luffy's smile looks like, and that he bets that it's kind, that he bets that he look kind. Really cool. The Grand Fleet, it's nice that Luffy suddenly has a whole bunch of power, a whole bunch of followers. They want to swear themselves to him via allegiance, but he doesn't want to have that responsibility because of his misconceptions of sharing food. But they, in the right, mindset of valuing freedom, just drink the sake cups anyways. Um, and he becomes the fifth emperor, which is of course super hype. Gets the massive bounty jump, and everybody gets nice bounties. Yeah, there are some downsides. One of them is very clear and obvious: pacing, especially in the anime. it can just feel very slow. Um, Partly just because there's a lot of a lot of different things happening at some point. Like all the different people fighting the different officers, and also Frankie, and also the Tontatas, and also, so many things. Um, and because you don't want it to feel like things are happening one after the other, the anime jumps back and forth between them. But because there's so many different things, it often means that you only get a couple minutes, like two or something, before it goes back to something else. So just as you're getting invested in a scenario, like Law fighting Dofi, or Sai fighting somebody, or Frankie fighting somebody, it cuts away again. And you're just like, well, fuck, You're invested again 1 minute, but then jumps again. You're like, I was just invested in that. Like, I care about the place where you're putting me to now as well. But just give me some time and just give me some of it, right? Mm, and then there's Bellamy. Uh, in the fight against Dofi, I mean, Bellamy itself, I just really didn't need him to come back. Uh, and then the fight against Dofi, Luffy gets put in a below floor where Bellamy fights him. And at some point, then, out of free will instead of the strings, and Luffy refuses to hit him and also takes a bunch of hits uh, because Bellamy has changed. But Bellamy was a complete piece of shit before, with no redeeming qualities. And then he now has achieved a dream, though. He has a dream. He doesn't achieve it. He has a dream. And his dream is to join like one of the most evil pirate crews and pirates in the world and do more harm. But just because it's a dream now, Luffy just kind of is like, oh, I can't, stop that. And makes Law 1v2 and takes a bunch of damage, which is annoying. It's like, him getting stuck somewhere, except even more frustrating. So I wish that was gone. Fujitora letting Dofi go is also kind of annoying. Like, Fujitora is against Dofi and he knows he's evil and knows he needs to be stopped, but he lets Dofi go anyways and is like, yeah, I won't like intervene. The Straw Hat fight, or not even that, I will actively like, fight against the Straw Hats. Um, and that needs to happen for the plot so that, Luffy can actually beat him because Fujitora would be way too strong of an ally here. But it's still annoying because Dofi's like actively like, okay, I'm gonna kill you after this. So I wish, but on a external side, I know that wouldn't be possible. Mm. And then, really important aside from the pacing, Usopp takes way too long to man up. Holy shit! See, Usopp is a coward, and oftentimes he runs away, even repeatedly, and then finally overcomes it to help his friends. So the Arlong Park one is the easiest example. He runs away twice, and then when he realizes that Shu will turn around to fight and potentially kill his friends, he overcomes his fear, risks his health, risks his life, and wins and fights. And generally, that's how it goes in writing as well. Characters are given three chances, especially if it's about running. So if the first time you fail, okay. If you run away, if the second chance you do it again, okay. And then the third time you're expected to get your shit together. You've had the chances from a narrative standpoint, the reader, the audience, the watcher, whatever, you should now do it. And Usopp does not. They try to stun Sugar, knock her out, and they fail. And people are getting captured, and Usopp is running. He's crying like a little bitch, loud and obnoxious. And Tontatas start being turned into toys, forever forgotten, worse than dead. And he runs. And they are calling for his help. They're crying for him, their savior, and he keeps running. Robin gets turned into a toy, permanently gone, and he's still running. No, I can't do this. Where? People are still calling for him. And then on like the sixth time or something, he's finally forced to actually do something and win by accident. And okay, winning by accident is fine, but it's just so obnoxious. He takes way too long, and the payoff does not, the satisfaction does not cover the incredible frustration and annoyance we feel watching him just be a little bitch nonstop. This is like the worst it's ever been in the show, I think. Uh, it's just such a pain. God damn. Much more minor of a problem is the Tontata stealing and being naive. It's occasionally just a setback and annoying at the start when they steal Zoro's sword, but overall, it's not that much of a problem. Much more of a nitpick. We mentioned it before, but we go to it, the category again, backstories. The backstories in Dressrosa are absolutely peak. There is no arc in One Piece that has backstories as good as Dressrosa. Maybe you have one personal favorite that you think is better, like Robin or yeah, basically Robin, Kuma, later Sanji, whatever you may think of. But the combination of Law and Dofi alone is massive, but we also get little bits of Baby Five and Senor Pink and the backstory of the country itself. It is so good. Uh, it's difficult to find anywhere in fiction backstories that are that good, or even, just stories that match the short story aspect of, I don't know, Law's backstory. You could just see it separately and have a good time and be sad about it, even without it being part of this grander thing. The backstories are absolutely excellent. And overall, Luffy just becomes that guy. So we had him, rise to fame in Marineford. Um, just through his kind of perseverance and status and conquers Haki and being acknowledged. But he didn't actually accomplish much. Or that sounds brutal, but you know what I mean. And then here in Dressrosa, he takes that further step to be that guy. Now with the actual strength to back it up, with the achievements following. So just a nice part to see, to have your crew, your protagonists rise that extra bit in the ladder. So overall, Dressrosa is a fantastic arc. It has so many highlights and positive things. It has the like minor downsides of like Bellamy. Um, the pacing is bothersome. If it was written in a manner, especially the anime, where it's a bit more smooth, then this might go up to like number one, number two arcs. We get to the top three. Where are we? We are in Enies Lobby. So Enies Lobby is a classic. When people think of the best One Piece arcs, Enies Lobby comes up a lot, and that is for very good reason. Enies Lobby is absolutely fantastic, and if for some reason you weren't fully in love with One Piece by the time you get to Enies Lobby, this is definitely the breaking point. If you're not fully in love after watching Enies Lobby, I don't know what's wrong with you. Maybe you're just very cynical or something, or maybe you love the world government. I don't know. So many highlights. The train fights are cool. It's mostly Sanji and Frankie, but the Sanji fights alone are cool. Fights with his hands once, chopping everybody up, fist fighting people with Frankie, just really cool and fun. Declaring war on the government is, I mean, it's a classic, right? Definitely one of the most memorable and iconic moments. Usopp shoot down that flag, or Sogeking shoot down that flag. Uh, Full explicit, war on the highest pounder in the world to save our friend. It is so badass. It is so hype. We see across, we are here, there's the border, and then on the other side are our enemies, and we will cross that border to save Robin. I Want to Live is, of course, directly connected to it, one of the most emotional moments in the series, and after all her, long periods of being closed off, kind of, and then her development to being scared and trying to protect the Straw Hats, and repeatedly resisting and refusing their attempts to save her because she is, traumatized and just cannot see anybody be reasonably, just beating the world government, and she doesn't want to cause the death of these people she cares for. Previously, she could just dip whoever she was with because she didn't care what happened to them, but she loves these crewmates now, and she wants to die because of the situation that she's in and how her life has been. But the crew and Luffy managed to turn that around, and that final, you know, exception, that boiling point of I do want to live, right, is so cathartic forever for her, but also of course the viewer, and it's both hype and brings tears to your eyes. You just let's fucking go, right? Like you can tense up your arm. You can be like, ah, let's save her, right? Next up, Monster Point. It's just great. Seeing him go out of control, just seeing Chopper go out of control, giving up just for the necessity. It's really funny to have him actually to when they stick the one guy in the fridge. But Monster Point is great. The uncontrollable aspect of it, the truly monstrous Chopper, because his voice, like these howls type thing, and he just is terrifying, and so it's really cool to see. Luffy versus Blueno is really cool. It's like where they first show off Gear 2. Um, cool fight watching Blueno just absolutely get beat the fuck in, as we see what Luffy has prepared to somehow beat Lucci. And the final fight versus Lucci is so good. The individual parts and the back and forth and the damage Luffy takes, but the last moment, where we see that he said like that, he won't fall again, right? Till he beats him, and then he just takes a bunch of massive hits, and he's falling backwards, right? We see him, like his feet go up, he's falling backwards, and we see that, and then he just tenses up and stops himself, and hits the most brutal jet gatling you've ever seen. It is so incredibly hype. It is so awesome. One of the most satisfying wins we've seen. Amazing, just absolutely amazing. Frankie, he starts in the prisoner situation but gets free a lot earlier than Robin, and so we get to see him fight, and he's kind of funny, but just also has that raw power. His burning of the Prince of Pluton is also a nice little insane moment, and the way that as a prisoner he's with Robin some of the time and just helps encourage her, and we just kind of see his positivity and start to hope that he might actually join us. Chimney and Gombe are just amazing. I think they're one of the best like comedic relief duo things we have in the entire series. She's just, silly. I don't know, the the mermaid is also just like, wait, why are you here? It's like I don't know, like a 6-year old, 8-year old, 10-year old, and her little pet uh coming along on like one of the most unprecedented, infamous attacks, terrorist attacks on the government. And not only is she like cutely coming along, she's not actually a burden. She's actually useful. She finds out like ways for them to go, and so well, she's funny to watch, and also in a nice way because she's actually helping. Sanji, forgive the spelling. Sanji getting his like a nice first power up is cool. Who doesn't like burning feet? Now he's also kind of a red leg, right? And using it to beat the shit out of the wolf. If he's the wolf, then Sanji's the hunter. Uh, really cool. The once actually Robin, gets her fruit bag, seeing her actually, finally fight, finally after expressing the will to live and the willingness to fight, resisting going up the stairs. That when once she actually is able to fight, it's really satisfying to see her beat the shit out of Spandam. And yeah, next page of highlights. There's always the zoo. So after Zoro beats Kaku, he's beat and Kaku hands him the key because Kaku seems to have, he's not as like purely evil as like Lucci in a way, right? Um, and he hands him the key and he's like, can't even move. And Zoro kind of, basically it comes to it, he kind of like wonders like, I wonder if like they'll take me back at like the boat making, right? But he worries that he doesn't think there's still like anything he can do except be an assassin. That's just, what he's trying to do. And Zoro just like, well, there's always the zoo, and it's so it's just in line that's so funny to me. It's like, well, you're a giraffe, so you can always just go to the zoo. Mary's farewell just hits hard. I was never. Maybe that's also why I don't like Water 7 as much, and the ship. I was never too emotionally invested in the ship. I never counted Mary as a crewmate. I not even close. And so Usopp arguing over it just annoyed me. Even if of course it's nice to have a nice ship. But when Mary was actually burning and her voice came out and, expressing that she wanted to carry them a little longer, it still brings tears to your eyes. It's so good. It's pretty funny, surprisingly so. It works in a good amount of like funny little things like the Zoro I mentioned, but also Chimney and Gombe and all the people we join in, like the giants and the the chicks with the rectangle hair. Surprisingly, for such a high stake thing, it actually has some nice jokes. Uh, the accumulated damage and damage reports are also really funny. Like the Marines are recording like the current damage done to the place, like casualties and stuff, and it starts very minor because they get cut off, and so the report, like recording center and Spannam like have a way underestimation of what's happening, and it's just really funny and satisfying to know that we're making progress without the enemy knowing, right? And then the shock at the actual numbers. Bounties. Finally, everyone gets a bounty. Poor Chopper. I do wish he would get, a bit of an increase, but Sanji is also hilarious. Just like, Zoroji, looks like just like you. It's nice to get bounties. It's nice to get this insanely high bounty for Luffy now, and everybody's looking at them, right? We just become famous uh, in a, positive type way, daring to resist the government. We also get a new ship, an awesome new ship that won't break as easily and, will just bring us as far as we need to go. Yeah, just generally. We also learn about O'Hara and the Void Sentry, some world building mixed into all this emotional stakes and fighting. So for downsides, there's a little bit. Sanji versus Khalifa is awkward and like, he won't fight women, so he just gets his ass beat and turned into a soft, very slippery thing. And it just sucks to see Sanji throwing a fight because it's a woman when Robin's life is at stake. We know he's staying true to his character here, but still, the Blossom Scatterer, it's the name of Usopp as a sword. Uh, but yeah, it's just Usopp being stupid and getting chained to Zoro and thus, you know, stopping Zoro from fighting, which is just annoying. Usopp has a tendency to do that. We get to the backstory, absolutely S plus tier. I mean, the start alone of Robin is brutal, escaping O'Hara, and then seeing how, you know, she progresses and progressed through life from the original escape just hurts. Like that loneliness that chases you, that, never finding a home and bouncing from person to person, unable to actually make friends at the risk of exactly what happens with the Straw Hats, because if you do, then you're stuck and you can no longer run, right? So we see her in that state and then improve once she's with the Straw Hats. Uh, so from the POV of Enies Lobby, her with the Straw Hats is actually still backstory. And as a result, she's one of the very, very few people in One Piece that we actually see change. Character development in One Piece is very minimal. Characters will grow stronger and we get more information about them, but the actual personality changes very, very little. Zoro is basically still the same. Sanji is basically everybody's roughly the same. That's not a bad thing. It's just how it's set up in such a long story. Uh, Luffy gets slightly more responsible over the time skip. That's about it. But Robin, we actually see her change multiple times, and backstories don't count. But she starts in that kind of resigned position. Then there is the I want to die position in with Crocodile, and this kind of careless hope for a while with the Straw Hats. Then the worry about dragging them down and wanting to die, and then wanting to live and accepting. It's a lot of changes, and it's just, especially for One Piece standards, really impressive. We get to see Robin and Frankie join permanently. Uh, Again, so nice. Since I grouped post Enies Lobby, it's just because not a lot happens, but we do get the uh, the reveal of Luffy's family, and Frankie joining is pretty funny. Uh, just crying, pretending that Robin's hurting him. Um, Lovely. Overall, Enies Lobby is an absolutely fantastic arc. It has arguably the highest emotional stakes we've had so far. We get Gear's second and amazing individual fights. We get, the high stakes on a broader level with the government. There is basically no problems, even though it's 50 episodes long. There's nothing that stands out where you're just like, ugh, wears it down. Absolutely fantastic arc. Absolutely peak One Piece. We are nearing the end. Number two is Marineford. Marineford is an absolutely fantastic arc. And again, it's one of those things when people think of what is if you're looking at the tier lists, a lot of the time this will be number one together with Enies Lobby. Marineford is the pinnacle of, obviously itself and Impel Down and Amazon Island, right? Boa's Island, and the individual smaller things that we've seen build up to it. Little meetings, Shanks visiting Whitebeard, Ace chasing Blackbeard, Ace running into Blackbeard, Ace capturing Blackbeard. All of it builds up to these grand stakes. It is the high point of everything up until then. Just the setting of like the war, all these grand players, people that individually probably may be able to 1v1 the entire Straw Hat crew. Of course, all the admirals, but even second in commands like Marco and so many people that are just way out of our league. Even Luffy, at his strongest, they're still way out of his league, right? And that just gives a really intimidating and high stakes setting that we've been working for, that we really want to win. We see so many cool people, so many cool things, and now Luffy's actually next to them. Ace's heritage is just cool. Like, just the individual revelation is, of course, nice, and we already had it in Impel Down. But how it, puts the perspective on everything that's happening and why, and how the world sees it and how everyone reacts to it is just really cool. Whitebeard is an absolute monster, and seeing that again and again is awesome. The raw power he has as like some giant tries to attack him, as the Admiral tries to freeze him, as he's incredibly injured and he's still just absolutely destroying everything. Having such a monster, as the side we're sympathizing with, just awesome seeing him destroy everything. A personal highlight, Boa protecting Luffy is really fun. Boa is always fun when she's simping for Luffy and just blushing and stuff, but in Impel Down we see her, specifically with Luffy, she's arguably still stronger than Luffy at this point. Um, whether it be a 1v1 or just, general capabilities. Um, and, Luffy fights runs into a lot of people that he can't actually beat here or just gets overwhelmed with. Smoker is the main example that comes for Luffy. And seeing her absolute rage and frustration uh, as they attack and hurt Luffy and then goes to fight them is just amazing. Just that expressing like I've never been this angry in my life, and just goes to beat the shit out of Smoker, and of course also actually gives him the key for the handcuffs, which is great. So Boa is a real highlight for me in Marineford. Crocodile saves Ace. This is something that's easy to forget, but we have a couple of times when the execution is about to happen. At the first time, it's not actually Luffy with Conqueror's Haki or something that saves it, it's Crocodile with his sand power. And his reasoning is just that, like, while, he's not friends with Ace or even Luffy or anything like that, but he just doesn't want to see the Marines enjoying their victory after all this cheap crap they pulled. Convenient. Of course, this includes the I think third moment we see Luffy uses subconscious conquerors haki, and now we have the grandest stage ever to use it on with all the, the most amount of people and the most powerful people. This is the world stage, and seeing all those people react to his conquerors haki is just super hype. Luffy in general just impresses everyone with his incredible just persistence and the conquerors haki, which is always fun to watch. Mihawk gives him that compliment that I think is very memorable, where just it's not a cheap trick or devil fruit power. One by one, he turns the people around him into his allies, right? Which is, of course, a very powerful ability, so to speak. And we see it with the Whitebeard pirates, rallying behind him, but also even Crocodile and Buggy and, Ivankov, all these people that he's, brought with him in a way. The moment when Ace is actually freed is just awesome. Seeing after all that we finally reached it, right? And the thing gets exploded, and there's the smoke, and it's just like, are they dead? I mean, we know they're not dead, but the characters are wondering, right? And then we see Ace's flame light up, like on his back, the Whitebeard symbol, and Luffy's just, so happy, and it's an awesome frame, and finally, right? Then it's real. I mean, it's a classic. Whitebeard, he's a relic from a bygone era, as somebody said. Uh, but while being that monster, he reaffirms Roger's dream, and once again, actually, sends the seas into chaos. But it's such an iconic moment. It's so strong. It just shows his will at the same time. Thank you for loving me is so strong. While it hurts that, it feels like maybe we could have escaped, but Ace just couldn't run in a way. Um, People just haven't died, right? So we wouldn't expect after all this time, after all this effort spent into it, and the fact that nobody ever dies in One Piece, that Oda would actually kill Ace here. But he does, and it's a fantastic decision, and it hits us hard. And knowing Ace's backstory, we're given to it over the course of the arc, but just the way, he hugs his brother and just the line, "Thank you for loving me," it hits so hard. It's such a good line, and it just brings to a boil all that like sadness and emotion we have as we see him, fall. All the added imagery, his Viver card burning up, uh, his necklace, splitting apart and rolling over to Whitebeard. So good. The climax of the war is Ace's death, and or not of the war, but of the story, and it's executed so beautifully. Sengoku the Buddha is just awesome. It does feel like sometimes he's just waiting, but once Blackbeard shows up and Sengoku actually, uses his human fruit um, in his mythical zone to become Buddha, it's actually really badass. Smashes Blackbeard and his pirates, really cool. Obviously, an awesome devil fruit as well. Buggy's broadcast just giving more info than the government wants is really funny and just nice to have. The government's trying to hide the evil things they're doing, and because Buggy has one random ass transponder snail, the world actually gets to see a lot more that they shouldn't. And that's satisfying, seeing the government fail at it and seeing the world see what we want them to see. Doflamingo's speech is also iconic. Justice shall prevail. Of course it will, because the winners will become justice, right? It's a true statement. It also fits to his character. It's a impactful line in the scenario with both sides fighting so hard. Um, Kids who have never seen war have different ideals from kids who have never seen peace, and of course that's highlighted in his backstory. But it's uh, it's an amazing and memorable line, even in the middle of all these things that are happening. Blackbeard's announcement, I'm slightly biased because, I love Teach, but his takeover and his announcement that this will be his era and the kind of backing he has to make it, the flexing he has of the two fruits of the crew of the Impel Down success. It's powerful, even if it's very frustrating for us in the moment. It is very cool and just a really good moment. Speaking of cool, Shanks' entry is so badass. Oh my god. Uh, this time Kobe is about to be killed and things are looking bad and we're all trying to escape, but it looks like we're just the leader is dead, the mission has failed, and we're just scrambling away, and the enemy still has basically all they had before. And Shanks comes out of nowhere and stops it. Shanks is always aura farming wherever he appears, but this is just another example of it. He holds his little speech. Even the Marine Admiral agrees, and things slowly fade out. His crew coming up, weapons pointed at Blackbeard, basically saying like, "Hey, you wanna fight?" And Blackbeard is like, "No." Yeah. Followed by that, after the Shanks entry at the end, we have the Law entry to save Luffy. And I'm a Law fan, so that's obviously gonna make me happy. But it's another, way where we barely get out in a nice little way. Buggy's little interaction with Shanks is also funny. Just they're still in the same dynamic, and it helps Buggy fall upwards even more. I mentioned how characters don't really change that much in One Piece, and Luffy was, the same from the start as he was to Sabaody and even to Marineford. But Ace's death is like forced character development. There's no way around it, and it was always gonna change him, and it changed him for the better. Such an important moment, and the show is just better as a result of not just the war as a great arc, but Ace's death um, is important for the series, but also important for Luffy, and that forced character development is just great. We have minor downsides. Okay, so it's we have the betrayal because at some point, I think Squardo is his name, gets convinced by Kainu that Whitebeard is selling them out, and betrays him and stabs him in the back with a massive sword. And that's really frustrating because it's a stupid like lie, and it's annoying that it's not dodged, and now we have this unnecessary like massive wound. Of course, on a meta level, it doesn't make a difference, but like in the actual story mode, it's incredibly frustrating that this cheap evil plan of Akainu worked out so well. Yeah, Akainu surviving is also unfortunate. We have like the hardest we could get hit. The mission failed, and we're devastated. Luffy is devastated. Everyone's devastated. Whitebeard's devastated, and Whitebeard is like the monster, right? And he's not just like the general monster, but he is a monster with a devil fruit power that is made purely for destruction, right? The Gura Gura fruit is destruction and death. And with full revenge counter hit, he hits Akainu. We can see his body like get split into different pieces, and he falls down the arc. And it would have been lovely to just have him die. But he lives and comes back and is, continues to be a problem. It would have been really satisfying if he died. Just so satisfying. Buggy wasting his broadcast is my last annoyance here. Uh, he has like I mentioned how he records extra things over that the public doesn't hear, but he wastes a lot of time just trying to like do his little show or prepare a speech about how he's lovely or something. It's really frustrating knowing that there's massive things happening that the government doesn't want to be seen, that could be seen, but Buggy being an idiot messes it up. Yeah. Not as much of a problem with the arc as a slight frustration that you get when watching it, right? Backstory, there's not a lot done. We get a little bit of Whitebeard and a little bit of Ace, and it works as woven in to kind of help us, especially for Ace, um, get that extra bit of empathy and motivation for wanting to save him. And this is the first time, I mentioned it before, but Luffy becomes that guy. I say it again in Dressrosa, but this is where first he becomes that guy, right? Of course, Enies Lobby kind of, shot him into like oh, this, but Marineford cemented him as, all the titles, the Son of Dragon, etc., 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 and that's really cool to see. Marineford is an absolutely excellent arc. It's very different from most One Piece arcs, but because of the excellent writing, because of the stakes and the drama and investment, there are few things to watch that are as enjoyable as Marineford, uh, with everything building up to it. The only reason it's not number one is because the first arc is just so peak. We get to the very top, the peak of the peak. If you've been paying attention, or if you have a checklist with all the arcs for some reason, or if you just have good taste, you know what's coming. Number one is Egghead. Egghead is an absolutely fantastic arc. It is so good. Egghead is filled to the brim with one amazing scene after the other. Dressrosa, for example, has a lot of amazing moments, as we saw, but they can be spread thin. And Egghead has higher, better amazing moments, like, with less thinning out, non-stop, in an amazing manner. Egghead is so good. So let's get started, shall we? We have Shanks versus Kid. Egghead shows us a couple things that aren't actually happening on the island of Egghead, and they are insane in stakes. First, we have Shanks versus Kid, the two powerhouses and supernovas of Law and Kid came out of their victory against Big Mom, and to encounter another emperor, to weigh their success versus another one. How were they? They were grouped before. And the answer when it comes to Shanks and Kid is that it's not even a contest. Shanks sees with future Haki that Kid would destroy a lot of ships and people, and so he jumps and with divine departure cuts Kid and his gun and his ship into half in one go. The rest of the crew just kind of begs to be to spare him. They take the rubbings of the poneglyphs, and the boat gets completely destroyed. Shanks in one moment one shots the entire Kid pirates, and they're basically done for. Absolutely amazing, super hype, amazing animation, fantastic. The second half of this is Law running into Teach. Um, their fight takes longer. Doc Q turns Law's crew into women, which leaves us with some funny law art that he powers through with Haki, so back to normal. And then they get to the nearest island, and Law almost kills Blackbeard just because he cuts away the flying wings, and Blackbeard would just drown. But because he even cuts Stronger in half. But Augur can warp now, so he teleports him and is fine. And we don't see the full fight, but on the island, Law loses. Uh, and Beppo manages to, using Chopper's drugs, go into his Oolong form and help his captain escape. But the Heart Pirates are still crushed. But Law and Beppo, at the very least, seem to survive. Another insanely high stakes fight. Emperors fighting things that are close to emperors. We have also Teach fighting Boa. Teach is an absolute monster off screen. We see him, holding her up. She can't use her leader ability. God, I'm sorry. She can't use her devil fruit. Um, and we also have Kobe in that situation, negotiating, Rayleigh showing up, just insane things back to back. After Kobe then, gets taken in, Garp solo attacks Teach's island. He was not there at the time, but he fights like five or so of the commanders himself, including Kuzan, who he had as a mentor and as a student. Insane animation again, so cool. A fourth like epic thing worth watching outside of the actual island. The fifth one being Pudding. Uh, Pudding gets kidnapped by Augur and Kuzan. which is, I actually felt bad for Cracker just getting just absolutely folded and frozen and dying, and Pudding is kidnapped. Four of these are Teach, so he is making, or at least related to him, so he's making absolute moves. But now let's get to the actual arc. We get the Emo reveal, like just more info about Emo when we see him, and we're getting closer to the point where he's like the final antagonist. Kuma's backstory is Oda again trying to compete to see if he can write sadder backstories than the absolute tragedies that he wrote with stories like Robin and Law, and he succeeds. It is such a sad backstory in a new, compelling way that makes us feel for him. It makes us feel for Bonnie. It makes us hate Saturn, and it's just relevant and unique. And seeing Bonnie grabbing into his memories using his devil fruit power, it's just so touching and amazing. Luffy versus Lucci is so good. It is a very short fight, and it's more of a reminder than a fight. He hits the Gear 2 pose, but then just goes Gear 5, and the transformation is so sick. Lucci is like, what's that on your wanted poster? And Luffy is like, oh, you want to see it? And just goes straight to Gear 5. Takes off his shirt. Transformation itself is also really well done. It just looks supernatural. And the way the white spreads, he switches, hockey blasting everywhere. That he smiles, he's laughing, and the laugh turns into a much more scary, unhinged laugh. And suddenly he's in front of Lucci, and then we get to see Luffy like in the reflection in the eyes of Lucci. And for the first time, we get to see kind of what Gear 5 looks like to actual enemies instead of the little cartoony, cool thing we see. And, Luffy's an absolute demon. I mean, look at that here at the top left. Like, that is nightmare fuel to have that coming at you. An Emperor of the Seas coming at you with reality warping powers, and you are absolutely fucked. Luffy versus Kizaru is much shorter, but it's still amazing. Just, we're much stronger than we were 2 years ago. It's, incredible seeing Luffy, Kizaru says hi, and Luffy doesn't even waste time. He just goes straight for the dash and attacks. And seeing that he's at such a speed where he can actually keep up with Kizaru is amazing. The high, level of the opponents we're fighting makes it all hype every time. There's so much world building. God, we get so much info from Vegapunk about the world now, about the world in the past, about the world in the future. Here now with other people, uh, the elders, stuff that's happening on the side. It's absolutely incredible. The satellites are fun. Vegapunk having them, splitting himself into them is just a cool concept. Seeing his head, seeing his full brain later, just funny. Lilith is, yeah, Lilith is Lilith. Shaka personally was my favorite. Uh, Shaka, I was actually sad and hurt when Shaka got killed. But the other ones are also just, well, most of them I just really liked and cared for. So establishing that as like, managing to do that with like splits of a real person is very cool. Boa's Seraphim, also Symbic for Luffy, was just really funny to me. The fact that even her clone takes over that, hopeless crush on our lovely Gear 5 Luffy is just a nice highlight. More highlights. Let's continue. Working together with CP0 was cool, that the government, most evil's assassins, even those get abandoned and will join us to avoid death. But Kagu's always been kind of chill, and Lucci definitely hasn't, but he's still powerful. And seeing Stussy, betray and actually help the Revolutionary Army, also really cool. Vegapunk just releasing info to the world, massive things that the government has been hiding for years, decades. to control information, and the number one scientist broadcasts all this to everybody, and the elders and Emu just kind of panicking as they try to figure out how to stop it. They try to destroy the robot, but it's not working, and it's so good. It's like Buggy streaming the Marineford War a little bit, but just more and better. Bonnie's Gear 5 is amazing. It's of course not actually Gear 5, right? She just, ages into what she would, you know, what she would suspect her most free version would look like, and influenced by Nika. This is how she would picture herself, right? And she doesn't have the powers of Nika. It's a copy, right? As if Bon Clay would copies Luffy's Gear 5. Um, and this as an expression of her like childish attributes and her desire to be free and using it is just so cool. It's such a cool frame as well. The Luffy just in the background, like losing it, his eyes like popping out as he sees it. Hilarious and awesome. Joy Boy's Haki is nuts. I mean, we see the robot finally unleashing it with a Haki knot, and it just knocks all the elders out. It just sets a new standard for like, you can see Luffy's face here on the right. That's like the Emperor with Gear 5 with insane Haki. And he has that reaction to the Haki that Joy Boy had stored. So super cool, just absolutely insane power. Really nice moment. Vegapunk outsmarting Vegapunk was also really cool. It was really annoying to have Greed incarnate kind of betray and just be kind of winning against the other Vegapunks by betraying them all. Um, and so seeing them make a plan ahead of time to work around it and succeeding at doing that, right? Is just really cool. York is a pain, and having Shaka, Edison, and the head Vegapunk set it all up to win is really cool because it works out smoothly. The others sacrificing themselves, but Lilith surviving, and basically because of the nature of Vegapunk and his brain and mind and how Egghead is his head with cooperation from the Cloud people we saw with Nami, their friends we find out, and seeing it work out through memory manipulation, so cool. Your own death as part of the plan and using it to big brain outsmart yourself is some next level shit. Next up, Kizaru is called to Akainu. I think this is easy to miss, but with all said and done, Kizaru calls Akainu. Or well, to be exact, Akainu calls Kizaru to see what the hell happened after the whole Joy Boy Haki thing. And he accuses Kizaru of like, did you not, were you not trying? Did you not do it? What's like, and Kizaru is actually emotional and tears up, and because he killed Vegapunk, who was his friend, and I just killed my dear friend, right? And surprisingly to us at least, Akainu actually pats back and he's like, I'm sorry, brother. Sincerely. He didn't know, and he considers him as like a brother in the military, I suppose. But Kizaru's like, that's too late, and he's just sad. And seeing that sincere emotion from Kizaru was really nice. Also nice seeing that Akainu actually does, have that care sometimes, and there's some dynamic between them. So that was also nice. And then Saturn's death was lovely, just because we have this unbeatable force, right? We actually got to fight the elders, but then it turns out they're basically invincible. They're just unkillable, absolutely ridiculous. Even after the biggest hits. So it felt like, an unbeatable force. How will we ever make progress? So seeing Saturn die was very satisfying because for one, hey, technically some progress, even if he got replaced. And also, of course, we had more of a personal grudge against him than the others because of his, interactions with Kuma and Bonnie. The only downside I could really think of over the course of 109 episodes was that Haki Knots seemed like a bit of a cop out. Uh, Storing Haki in a piece of rope and being unable to leash it by pulling is a leap, and it seems more like Oda needed an out of the situation, um, or some way to communicate or show what Joy Boy was capable of. And yeah, so while it does feel a bit odd, and people made tons of memes about, I don't know, Shanks just using Roger's Haki or something, Haki Knots, and is actually a fraud. Stuff like that is funny, but even though I think it might be a cop out, it's so awesome that I can ignore it. I mean, again, look at Luffy's face on the red picture there on the right. I mean, that's how we all felt, right? So Egghead is absolutely peak. The fact that a peak story like One Piece just keeps getting arcs that are at the top of these lists is amazing. The stakes are rising up, which means that we're able to keep getting such moments, and it is so exciting in every way possible. Egghead is lovely, and I'm so glad that we've reached this point and I get to enjoy stuff like this. Now that we went through the arcs individually, here's kind of an overview of the general ratings, with colors to kind of symbolize how far down or up they are. As you can see, generally there's a bit more red early on, things still being figured out, and a lot of really high stuff around some of the later aspects. I wanted you to note the percentages. So 25% is like at Water 7, right? And 50% is like almost done with Fisherman Island. It's easy to kind of have in your head that the end of Marineford is halfway through the story, but we've reached a point where it's more like 45% and the manga 40%. So the later arcs have more time. When you see listed, uh, two arcs, Wano and Egghead, have as much or more episodes as the first 15 arcs combined. So, just to keep in mind that they have more time. So if we look at a bit here, we just have, first of all, One Piece is fucking goated. Even arcs that are at the bottom of the list in a normal tier list, that might mean that they're not very good or not fun to watch. But with One Piece, that's not the case. One Piece, even the bottom of the barrel is above most other things that, other shows have to offer, right? And so it's just incredible. Um, Everything except Long Ring on Land is just a good arc. And even if something is in the middle of the pack in this list, that would be at the top of the pack of a worse anime. It's a generally pretty even spread of pre and post time skip arcs. I think people like to fight too much about whether, pre or post is better. Especially often there's some people that are very set on pre time skip being a lot better and post time skip losing so many things. But when you actually look at the individual arcs and you kind of stop tunneling on the Marineford saga, the Marineford saga is the end of pre time skip, and it is absolutely peak One Piece. And as a result, with the kind of recency bias, they judge the entire pre-time skip as if it were that good or close to that good, and kind of forget all the mediocre, not so great things in between. And if you look at it from a broader perspective, you notice that both sides just have fantastic arcs and also kind of mediocre aspects, right? Some of the earlier stuff, Oda is still figuring things out. The list has a lot of red in the early stuff, Orange Town, Little Garden, where he's still figuring out, what he's going for, getting better at writing, figuring out the characters and structures he wants to have for islands. So Little Garden, for example, has really cool world building, but the plot itself and the villain are kind of mediocre. And so, of course, he gets better with that over time. Later arcs are longer, like a lot longer. At least, stuff like Dressrosa, Egghead. And so they have, of course, a lot more time to build up the setting, to have more epic moments, to have more anticipation. And so when you're thinking of like which did I enjoy the most, they have a bit of an unfair advantage. Even if, it's over the course of more episodes, when you think of it as a whole, it feels like it was better, which it might very well be. But that is a reason why some of the later arcs have a higher rating. They just had more time to be amazing. Um, yeah. You can see a peak between Enies Lobby and Marineford. So after Enies Lobby or Water 7, if you also want to count it as really good, you just had Thriller Bark, and then you had Saboti and the Marineford Saga, all of which are just absolutely fantastic. And so around that time, you definitely have a high peak, and then a little dip before you get to Pug Hazard and Dressrosa, and things start looking up again. So thanks for watching, especially if you watched through the entire thing. Obviously lovely. Subscribe, like, etc. This took a lot of time going through everything, looking at the episodes, looking at the counts, kind of noting down, organizing the pros and cons of an arc, comparing it to the length of it, preparing all the slides and pictures and setting it up and recording it again and organizing it. It takes a long time. It's of course much easier if you just sit there and just kind of improv talk about which arcs you like the most after organizing them kind of based on a vibe. Um, and that can be fun, but this type of thing takes a long time. So I'd appreciate it if you can subscribe, etc. Lastly, you know, let me know about your own opinions. Do you just fully disagree with my ranking because you have bad taste, or are there specific arcs that you really like that you wish to enlighten the comment section with? Just let us know. And that will be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you on the Discord or in the next video.